Okay, I wanted to welcome everyone here to part two of our interview with the Old Mage in Greenwood. We found a little quieter spot in the back of that tavern that we were at last time, and we are going to continue our questioning about the Forgotten Realms. I do hope you enjoy. Okay, welcome back to our second episode of Mages and Sages here. And we are going to continue our interview with Ed Greenwood, the mastermind behind the Forgotten Realms. How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Even better now that we're chatting. We are being joined by my longtime friend Curry Russell. He's been playing in my home campaign for 35 years. Say hi, Curry.
Hey, everybody.
All right, fantastic. Curry's going
Hi, Curry.
to Curry's going to be fielding questions coming in from Facebook, so that we can get into as many of them as we can. And Ed, I wanted to start off with something actually from your sister,
Okay.
with Adrian.
Yep.
She read, I guess she listened to the podcast from last week, and she heard the little tidbit when you mentioned something about Candyland.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask you. She said that you would create side adventures
Yes.
in Candyland. I guess you would land on a certain space or roll or whatever, draw a certain card, and then you would go into the dark forest, as she called it.
Yeah, another board.
Oh, was it really?
Oh yeah. Not like a heavy-duty cardboard, good-looking board, but I would draw my own. I mean, there were certainly hunks and hunks of cardboard around the house. All my father's boxes and everything. We're from a family that, well, my maiden aunts and grandmas who raised me after my mom died, they'd been through 2 wars and a depression, so you never threw anything away.
True.
Okay, brown paper bags they would from the supermarket, they would slit open, and that became things for the kids to color on and crayon on and write on, so that they weren't using good paper. My father brought home all the unused examination booklets from the university he taught in. They all had to be handed in. So if you tear off the front cover, which is handed in, then it's not really an examination booklet that any student can, falsify an exam anymore. It's just a booklet with lined, ruled, printed lines on it. And instead of throwing these away, because you don't throw anything away, he'd bring them home for us. So, and the same way, I had lots and lots of cardboard around, and I would get out some of his markers and I would make sideboards for games, particularly if the game was pretty simple, or if we discovered a flaw in it, in terms of the way we played it together, so it became boring and repetitious. Like if you discovered there was a loophole in the rules or a probability thing because of the way the game had been put together, where you could almost always win by just doing this one thing. We'd certainly sat through enough euchre games with our grandparents. They were so bored with playing euchre, they would deal them everything face up, and then they would look around the table. You would have won that hand, you would have won that hand, you would have, and they'd collect the cards again and just shuffle them and then do them around. Or my grandfather, who was dead bored, would look across the table and say, "I'm going it alone." in euchre, and he had no cards. He was totally bluffing. But he was just so bored with this thing, doing liven things. He was, okay, so in the same way, when I found something boring about the kids' games that we were playing, and Candyland is a pretty basic game, and it's governed by your dice rolls. If you're going to fall into a cherry pit or whatever, that's determined by the dice. There's almost no skill in playing.
Right.
Same way as Chutes and Ladders. It may, or Snakes and Ladders. It may be interesting to play, but you as the player are just at the whim or at the mercy of your rolls. You don't have a chance to build things, do strategies, try things, bluff, anything like that. So I would add stuff to all the games by just doing my own side thing. And I didn't ever want to, that's the other thing that I inherited from my upbringing. You never ever defaced anything. So the original Candyland game was totally untouched. Never wrote on it or on the cards or anything. Although back in those days, all of the major manufacturers tended to give you a blank card or two in a deck of something. It would have the properly printed back of all the other cards, and it would be on the same stock. And the intent was, if you lost a card or it got torn or marked, so that the gamblers in the family knew exactly which card, you would make a replacement card, or you would use the rules card that from the front of the deck as your missing ace of spades or joker or whatever it was.
Right.
Well, in the same way, okay, so I would never ever touch any of that stuff. I would just make my own components and play games. I was experimenting with how to make play more interesting, not to win, because I've never ever in my life played games to win. I don't care who wins. I play them to have a good time with my friends, my family, strangers who are good at gaming and want to hang out. But I want it to be fun playtime. So I'm trying to do things that make the game engaging without making it overly complicated. Good example, Magic the Gathering was great fun at the beginning, but when it got into instants and interrupts, and I had to keep track of all this stuff, I'm going, my brain, this is work.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I've never really gotten into Magic myself because of that.
Yeah, there comes a point at which it's no longer a fun release from the pressures of everyday life. And of course, you can come up with a grim, dark, nasty role-playing experience in which the setting is as stressful as real life. And then I think to myself, wait a minute, I can understand why at big moments, character death or threatened character death, things can be really moving and engaging and high stakes. But surely this thing should be more fun than daily life, or why are we doing it?
Yeah, no, exactly. No, but she sounded almost scarred when I read her post.
Well, okay, she was the youngest for the longest time because my brother Mike came along like a decade later. So when it was the three of us, I'm the oldest, and then my sister Martha, and then my sister Adrian. She was the youngest. So we all could, and particularly when my father was playing, because my father, he liked to be polite and nice to the kids, but he didn't like to let them win, because he thought that was the wrong thing to do.
That's the same thing that I do, and I get yelled at for it.
Yeah, so if you were Adrian, you got creamed a lot in these games. Until, she had enough experience with an individual game that she was on a level playing field with the rest of us. Just because she was younger and hadn't seen as much, she hadn't as much experience, she hadn't had her father play chess against her, for instance, as much as I had. So she could get blindsided into a checkmate where I would see it coming and go, I can try and fend this off for a couple moves. My father's still going to beat me, but at least I'm going to have the satisfaction of making him frown and think and have to trade a piece or something like that.
Right. Well, I like that. Okay, I think Curry had a question for you he wanted to start off with as well.
Okay, let me pull this up for you guys really quick. This one is from a gentleman named Nicholas James. He's from Manitoba. And his question he'd like to have answered because he's got a campaign coming up this weekend, as a matter of fact. So I'll see if I can get this taken care of for him. Yeah, exactly.
No pressure at all.
All right. His question is, has the Order of the Forgotten Page evolved in the years since its last mention, and has the merging and unmerging of Azuth's divine spark with Asmodeus influenced this branch or the Magistrati in general at
Yes.
Yes. Great answer. Favorite answer.
Okay. Next question.
Okay. What happened during the time jump? And by that I mean the spell plague hits, and then 100 years pass, and the official Wizards of the Coast published Realms products don't talk about what happened during that gap, which is a deliberate policy on their part to make it easier for newcomers to get into the realms without having to purchase all this back stuff, memorize it. In other words, like we were talking about earlier, making it as stressful as real life. Oh my God, I have to get a degree in astrophysics to play this game. Oh my goodness, I have to become a sage and historian of the realms. Okay, so what happened in this particular case with the Order of the Forgotten Page and with the Zuth is, okay, that influence and then breaking the influence means there was internal turmoil within the order, and there were what we would call schisms.
One of my favorite topics, schisms. Go on.
Yeah. So a lot of people went their own way. And because of the nature of Azuth, and because of the nature of the Order, the usual thing where people murder each other. I mean, where people get into great violence over things. No, they didn't. They just went their separate ways. We don't talk to those people over there anymore. This sort of thing, as opposed to we try and thwart them or offer them violence or lead them into destruction. There was more of the, okay, we can further Azuth and further his causes and aims in our own way, in a different way. And the Harpers do this a lot too, particularly because there are senior Harpers, the old fogies who are also chosen to Mystra, like, Storm and the other 7 and right. Elminster. They have 2 masters. They have Mystra as well as the Harper cause. So although they are Harpers and they will help other Harpers, if another Harper tries to tell them what to do, they may go along with it, but not if it's something that goes against what Mystra wants them to do at the same time. But again, they're not going to have an open fight with the person unless the other Harper, pushes them. Like, you are going to do that, aren't you? You are going to do it right now, aren't you? Unless they are silly enough, stupid enough to push it, there's never going to be an open disagreement. They're just going to go and do their own thing. Think of all the things that in Middle-earth, people who didn't see the world as widely as wandering Gandalf did, for instance, would expect Gandalf to do. To a lot of the hobbits in the Shire, he was that funny old man who came once a year and let off fireworks. Right. But if they asked him, "Cole, could you just do this?" And he's always thinking of the entire continent that we see there, and probably more than we saw in the books, and what the effects of anything that anybody does on it, and he's playing a long game. Elminster and all of the 7 are in the same boat. So they are Harpers, but they don't, they don't strictly follow the hierarchy and what they're told to do. Same thing with the Order of the Forgotten Page. You have people doing their own thing, okay? Worshipping Azuth in their own way. There are even people around who still worship Savras, and in their own way.
Right.
And the deities seem to be just fine with this. That's one of the things that a lot of real-world gamers, and particularly people who aren't familiar with their realms at all, but are reviewing it or just coming across it for the novels, if they themselves come from a monotheistic background, if they worship God, for instance, they find it hard to wrap their heads around the fact that everybody worships everything. Therefore, there is no, and they will ask me things like, yes, which is my God? All of them. Yeah, but which one is really mine?
All of them.
All of them. And they have a hard time squaring it. Yeah, but who do I follow first? Okay, you follow everybody. The exceptions are fanatics, priests, and paladins, who are dedicated to one deity above all. And even then, many of them are, their dedication to one deity means they're dedicated to an allied group of deities, like the triad or whatever it is, deities that go together.
That's interesting that he put it that way. I always just assumed that worship from a polytheistic world was from a reader or a player. I had always looked at the pantheon as selectively or I can't think of a better word, but just agnostic in one form or another. Let's say where we had worshippers of Maliki or Shar or what have you, they didn't necessarily doubt the existence or the dogma of other god figures of any kind. They just simply dismissed it because it wasn't in line with their moral compass for whatever reason. I'd never really heard it described the way that you had put it, that we acknowledge and we follow all the gods. It's just kind of dependent on what our focus is, more or less.
Oh, sure, yeah. Like if you're a fisherman, you are either worshiping deities or you're sort of sacrificing to them so that they won't get angry with you. Like
Umberly, for instance.
Yeah, Umberly for a fisherman. And you really don't care too much about Sylvanas or Myliki if you live far from a forest as a fisherman on a rocky coast. It's not part of your life. But it was more like to understand that everybody believes in all the deities, and they're sort of, which is one of the reasons why dead gods and gods that may have come from other worlds due to planar travel are still worshipped and still seem to function. Sometimes it's a local god granting the spells and answering the prayers, and sometimes they're working through another deity, and it's sort of like there's a tapestry of gods, and there's a tapestry of belief and faith. And then, because this is a role-playing game played by different people all over the world, the way we play the game and what we put as in the forefront of our games varies from group to group. It's whatever you're comfortable with. You know, there could be tables of gamers who are atheists, tables of gamers who are agnostics, table of gamers who are devout believers in a particular faith. And there's no reason for the Forgotten Realms to be an uncomfortable, unwelcoming setting for them. They just shift the game to be what they want. In the same way that we play the game in different styles, there are people who feel very uncomfortable about putting on funny accents and acting the characters. True. Or putting on costumes, and there are other people who love it. And some people play the game like a football quarterback, with a party caller saying, okay, the thief is going to run around the back and backstab it, and cleric, you do this, and magic, and there are other people who say, excuse me, if I wanted to play a war game, I play a war game. We're role-playing here. I, Relnar, the wizard, will do this,
That's good, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, different stuff.
I like that. Curry, didn't you have a question about one of the Seven Sisters?
Well, I wanted to rewind at just a little bit because there was a glaring caveat for me that just came out in that. And I'm sure this has been put in front of you many times before. You had made mention of deity or godhead or god figures from different planes or different dimensions. This has always been one of my long-standing fascinations. And I know that you're not going to tell me anything. I just want to hear your answer. And it has everything to do with AO and who he's talking to.
Nobody knows.
Exactly.
We kind of hit on that before.
Yeah, and there are some things mortals are not meant to know. It's up to the dungeon master, the reader, the players, the group of players. That is AO, and that entire scene was not my doing. It was done in-house at TSR.
Okay.
And
I did not know that. I could have swore that was yours.
No, and it was left. And when I asked, it was like, well, we're leaving it up to people. And you must remember back in that day that there was great concern over the game being banned from entire markets.
Sure. Yeah.
What they used to call in-house at TSR, we don't want to upset angry mothers from heck. Particularly if those angry mothers are CEOs of companies that are retailers that could keep us out of their entire retail chain, or the old thing that John Lennon, when he said he was bigger than Jesus, and they started smashing all the Beatles records and burning them and stuff. They didn't want any sort of backlash. So one of the ways of saying it, and to keep the lid on things, was, look, there is an over deity. Yes, it could be yours, could be, and leaving it up to you. And I think in the case of the D&D cosmology, which changes from edition to edition, and our heads and minds are blown every time we redo a manual of the planes, and everything's different again. In one edition, it's the Happy Hunting Grounds. Oh, they're not called that anymore. Sort of thing. Well, in the same way, because the game has a structure, and because it affects what the Dungeon Master creates, or any world builder, it's awfully hard to open that can of worms unless you are going to write a whole line of products that explains who AO is, and what is the limitations of his powers, and what level he operates on, and who it is that he's reporting to. That's a can of worms. So that and they opened the can, showed us the can was over there, and then put it on the shelf untouched for us to do with what we will.
All they did was show us an empty can, though.
Yes, well, yeah, yes. Can. No, my answer is, it's not up to me. That has to be your choice.
I'll just have to live with that answer. Thanks.
You will.
There you go.
Question. You had something about the Seven Sisters you want to talk
Okay,
about.
because I'm truly a 12-year-old boy at heart, and I come up with stupid questions. The internet meme of marry, date, kill. Are you familiar with this at all, Ed?
No.
Okay. Basically, you're given a certain narrow field of choices. So I'm going to give you a narrow field, and that's going to be the sisters, just the 7 sisters. What would be your choices of as Elminster? Which one would you marry? Which one would you date? Which one would you kill? And I want a why for each of those.
Oh boy, as Elminster, none of
Yes,
the above.
sir.
And none of the above. Remember, he's like surrogate father to most of them.
Okay, I'll
yeah.
give you that. Sure.
Okay, but as Elminster, the one that he would marry or consort with, the most likely for the longest time would be Storm. Except, of course, things haven't quite turned out that way. The one that he'd be most likely to kill would either be Kalue or the Symbol, depending on who went nutso hardest, fastest in, and he had to save the realms from.
Okay, I like that.
Though those are the two most likely. The one that he'd have the least to do with, and I don't mean dislike, but just they are different in what their interests are, that's Dove. Because she is, although she can use the weave, she is far more down to earth, use a sword, bake a cake, use a tool, fix this yourself with your hands. Magic is a potent force, and like having gel ignite in the house, should be used as little as possible. Whereas Elminster and the Chosen, who follow Mystra most devoutly, and who are her instrument, her active instruments, it's like spread the use of magic, have everybody using magic, And Dove is the one, and it doesn't mean Mystra doesn't tolerate her, because Mystra needs her for balance, needs her for the other approach.
Okay.
Think of it as the modern person who lives in an urban, real-world environment, and everything is electronic, and there's a power failure, and
Who are you going to turn to? Right.
Yeah, they're stuck in the dark in their 83rd floor apartment because they have nothing they can light, and Dove is the prepper who has not just candles and matches, she has a bow drill and can start her own fire, and she has an oil lamp, and she has MREs that heat when you open them and stuff like that.
Right.
She's ready for this because she always sees the other way, the other path.
Those are great answers.
And the one that that Elminster is working the most closely with now is Laeral, because, Open Lord of Waterdeep, and Elminster is working for it at the moment. He's running the watch. And Laeral has done the most ruling, and that's something that Elminster has had to rescue all of the 7 from in the past, but he's therefore most in the same headspace with somebody who's trying to administer a country. I don't mean tyrannically rule, I mean make life better for everybody, keep the trains running on time, improve the postal service, all that that sort of stuff. And the one that he would not the one who he would have hot sex with more often than any of the others would be the Symbol. But she's also the one that he could end up having to kill. You see what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, and again, this is Elminster on any given day, and this is how I see Elminster. Others may see him differently, and he's not me. He's my signature character because TSR and then Wizards continued. It forced us to have signature characters. If I was left to my druthers, Elminster would be far more in the background. And this is something that the various holders of the copyright of the realms have gone back and forth on, because the more powerful and prominent the NPCs are, the less your player characters get to shine in the published realms. I've never understood the argument that says, we can't do anything at the playing table because all these people are in the way. That was the old Marvel Comics problem. Why can Spider-Man have any adventures at all when the Avengers are sitting there? They've got a god on the team, and over there are the Defenders,
Right.
and they've got another god on the team, and then the Fantastic Four, and they beat Galactus every Thursday. And Ragnarok is happening in Thor every 100 issues. I mean, what do you need some guy who puts on a costume and swings around dirty, dingy buildings and alleyways? What do you need him for? But yet, it's very easy to have room for all of these. The Guardians of the Galaxy really doesn't square with the
Right.
down to earth, and yet there is room for those low level things. to switch comic companies to DC now, the most effective scenes in many of the movies are the down-to-earth, what it would be like to be a real person having contact with those superheroes. And the same thing happens when you see Robert Downey Jr. portraying Iron Man and having interactions with, kids who are in their workshop or in their barn, that sort of stuff.
Right.
And we always had the obligatory Stan Lee scene, which was played for laughs. But on many occasions, Stan Lee was sort of standing in for every man. He was saying the thing that your average person would say, maybe in a cooler, funnier way.
Right.
But he was reacting like, what the heck, and so of course you have room for all of those things. And man, as you can see, I can ramble for hours on any topic. So shut me up now.
No, that's great. I would really like to spin you off of one of those topics. I had talked with Jeff, I guess a couple months back, and I had asked him to reach out to you about that specific topic regarding Stan Lee. And my question was, had you ever had a chance at any of the cons to meet him, spend time with him? Did you guys get to know each other, and how do you feel about his passing?
Well, yes. Okay, here we go. I've known Stan Lee for years. Okay, I got unofficially had the B put on me to be a continuity editor, which was a joke title. I wasn't paid. Way back in the day when they were launching the X-Men, when it was going from reprint back to original stories, because they hadn't kept full collections of their comic books. And this is pre-internet, so nobody could blab about any of this stuff. But Ron, Tom, Chuck, and George ran the Silver Snail comic shop in Toronto. And George Olszewski, who he became the editor of the comic book Buyer's Guide, and went down to the States to live, and word got around that they needed to check some stuff in X-Men, as in the Beasts. The apartment, when you come in through the door, does the door open to the right or the left? There's a sculpture there. It's on a table. Is the table to the left or the right? Where would it be in shot? Because obviously, for whatever reason, they didn't have the pencils, or they didn't have that issue. So, and somebody at the Snail, probably Ron, said, "Oh, well, I know there's a kid who has the entire run because he bought them all from me. Why don't I just phone him up and find out?" So it became a broken telephone thing, And the next time I was at a convention, Stan Lee said, "Oh, are you the kid?" Sort of thing. I said, "Yeah." And much, much later, at a fan expo in Toronto, at which he was a guest and I was a guest, we were both staying in the hotel that changes its name every 5 years. But it was the one that is built into the Blue Jays Stadium. So we just end up calling it the Blue Jays Hotel. Okay, and the Blue Jays had a home game on the Saturday of the convention, and I think it was against the Yankees, and a fan, probably a visiting American, lit a cigar in the elevator bank after the game, and of course triggered all the smoke alarms. I say probably American because we got it drilled into us: no smoking, no smoking, no smoking within 15 feet of the sign, blah blah blah. But someone lit one inside the hotel. So we all get woken up. There are these automated alarms, not just the ding, 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 but there are these, you must evacuate now. Do not use the elevator, use the stairwell, And we all ended up, because it was like 3 a.m. or whatever, we all ended up in the lobby. And there was Stan in a smoking jacket, the Hugh Hefner look.
Of course, right.
And he says, "God damn it, I'm too old for this." He was in his 80s with it. He says, "I need my sleep." And I said, "Well, Stan, my car's in the parking garage. It won't be very warm. But, you can go and sleep in there. And I've actually got food." He says, "Do you have any drink?" And I said, "It's Canada. We don't have alcohol in cars. We're not allowed to get anywhere near there." He says, but I said, "The bar's over there." He says, "Yeah, they closed the bar." And I said, "Of course, we're in Canada. It's the middle of the night. Of course, because it's a restaurant, and it's going to open to serve buffet breakfast the next morning in about 3 hours. So of course they've closed it. They're doing all the stuff." But I didn't have any booze to give him. But we sat around and talked. And to me, he is Stan the Man, because I started buying comics when I was very young, and he was still writing a lot of them directly then. We're talking Hulk and so on was just around issue 100, around there. Comics were still 12 cents each. And there was an annual or a double issue, usually in November, every year for every title. And there were some titles that fell on and off. They shared superheroes and so on, Submariner and so on, the Human Torch, and there were Marvel team-ups and 2-in-1s, and they were still publishing all the horror comics. So I remember all of that era, and then I remember Roy Thomas coming as an editor. He said, yes, I'm older than dirt. I remember all this stuff, but Stan was always there. And if you wrote letters to the editor, he answered some of them, usually the editorial staff. But if it was something that turned on Marvel policy or what he wanted you to get out of the comics in terms of values, he would often answer himself or give them a 1 or 2 line quote that they could publish. Right. So it felt to everybody who read comics regularly, as opposed to just buying one issue in isolation, you felt like you knew Stan because he was talking to you every month. And I did get to meet him. He is the end of an era because
agreed. Yes, sir.
It goes from, I remember I'm so old, I remember Timely Comics becoming Marvel Comics.
Right.
And back then, and I remember Ditko's Spider-Man and Kirby's, the back in the beginning. And I've watched everything happen since. And I've watched Stan grow and mutate like the rest of us to take in the digital world, to lead the way in some cases on superheroes and people in the books who were of different skin color and different gender and yet could still, play a part in the heroics. And at times be out of step with some things. And like everything else in comics, some things that you do in storytelling work, and some things in storytelling you wince and move on. But he was there for everything. And I love the way that he didn't mind poking fun at himself and can therefore got used. He was a good sport about it in all of the Marvel Universe movies, where he could do things that you could just sort of go, oh great, and because they added to the movies. That bit in the Spider-Man movie where he's the librarian in the school. He doesn't have a word of dialogue. He's on screen for 16 seconds, and yet the way that he did the acting made the scene work. To me, it's like your heroes and the people who are always there, even if you don't view them as heroes, that are there when you're a little kid, there's a big wrench when they die, when they leave the scene. For me, it's happened with people like Roger Zelazny, people like Terry Pratchett. They are part of your world, and then they're taken away. Particularly if they're taken away when you think it's too young. Stan got the other thing. Stan got to hang around and was like, my God, this man's going to live forever. He's immortal.
Exactly.
I really thought he was going to live to be over 100. I really did.
Well, I mean, when you think of the punishing schedule the man kept of going to conventions, and that's the thing, you're doing it for the fans. I'm in a much lesser way. I'm in the same boat when it comes to the realms. You being there for people who share your love of the creative things you've worked on is more important. But certainly more important than the money, because for most of us in gaming, there isn't any.
Right.
For too many of us in writing, there isn't any, or not enough. Stan was one of the lucky ones. There were millions, but there are millions there in large part because of movies and rights being paid and licenses and stuff. And yet, when people leave the scene, you are aware that even if they were old fogies or of their time or no longer relevant or yesterday's news or whatever label you want to throw at them, they are a pillar of your world. They are, quote, always there. They're part of the furniture. Somebody said, "Oh, I like your face. You can't have it. It's a fixture." These people are fixtures on the scene, and when they go away, it's a shock and it's a loss.
Well, if you think about it, they're the pillars that helped create the Forgotten Realms, and then Lord of the Rings, and all these iconic, maybe not so much Lord of the Rings, but all these iconic characters you see now, especially with all the Marvel and DC comics and stuff, that they've built our imagination to what it is today.
Yeah, yeah. They've become part of the culture, and people are riffing off of them and parodying them and reacting against them and moving on from them. And the younger people may not even realize that this thing or that thing they like is built on the shoulders of these giants who were here before, even though it's a different story. And you look at Harry Potter. Harry Potter is an English school story, and there was an entire genre of those for a century before Joe Rowling was ever thought of, and magic put together. Nor was she the first one to put them together. I have earlier examples on my shelves at home, and these things build from the earlier things. Not just, I don't mean that the person is deliberately copying them. I mean, they fit into a genre that's developing. In the same way Star Trek, it's the wagon train to the stars, as it was, that was the elevator pitch. Roddenberry said the wagon train to the stars. Well, in order to say that, you have to have a pulpy science fiction genre already going. Hey, men with glass globes on their head and ray guns go out into space. Yes, okay. And wagon train, westerns. Oh, I get that. Opening up the West. Yes. That, in other words, they're built on things that are already there culturally. So, that those are the touchstones. And there's the old question of when is the golden age of anything? And in Canada, it was when is the golden age of hockey? And Ken Dryden, our famous goalie, answered when you were 12. That's always the right answer, when you were 12.
No matter how old you are now.
Yeah. So for everybody, they're going to give a different answer if they're at different ages, because they don't know the ones before. I watched this distinctly, and we're coming up to a Super Bowl weekend, and someone talking head on television is excitingly saying, "And the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Tom Brady," and the old guys go, "Brady, Brett Favre." You see what I mean? It's and there are people who are even older who go, "Oh, that young turkey? No, back in my day,
No, exactly. Back in my day, it was the Dallas Cowboys. So.
Yeah, the America's team.
Yeah, well, they were.
Yeah, they were America's team, and they're another example of a fixture going away. The Dallas Cowboys, when I was a kid, was Tom Landry in his raincoat and suit,
in his hat,
with his fedora on, standing on the sidelines, calmly coaching with a stone face. That was the Dallas Cowboys, and when he was ushered out the door, forget it, they're not the Cowboys anymore.
Well, they weren't, and then he wasn't ushered out the door; he was fired.
Yeah, I was being polite. Yeah, but I mean, and that was another example of, oh no, they've got one of these owners again. These newfangled owners. Oh, I'm in charge now. It's like, so you're seeing it as a new broom, an agent of change. And there's one thing that both excites people, but that they hate. It's change. We're excited when there's possibilities. We hate personal change when the touchstones of our world, whatever they are, like the buildings we walk past to school every day, when they tear them all down, and you go, what happened? Why did they tear those down? That was my tree,
Right. No, you know what? And it's like my wife, whenever we go by a building we passed hundreds of times in the last 25 years, and it's not there anymore, she's shocked.
Yeah.
She feels an emptiness. She's like, I can't look at it anymore, because you're so used to seeing it there. When it's gone, it's like it's part of you that's now gone.
Yeah. And I happen to be one of these people who, when they go to a destination more than once, they remember it as sort of photographic images. So if I'm going to a park, I grew up in the city of Toronto. Toronto's large. New York and LA are larger in North America, leaving out all the Mexican cities,
Right.
Toronto's next, then Chicago. Okay, so it's big. But when I go to areas I haven't been in for 20 years, I have this mental map unrolling. Oh yeah, and there'll be this Chinese food restaurant at this corner, and then this is the corner with the leaning lamppost, and they've all changed. How dare they? All the gas stations that were on every corner, they're all gone because real estate's too expensive, too valuable to have a gas station parked on it. So they've all gone, and I think, how do these people live downtown? How do they ever gas their cars up? Where do they get gas? Well, of course, they know where the few that are left are,
Right.
and I don't. But my mental picture that is unwinding, and all the stores I used to love to go to, they're gone. And I feel a loss. And Stan and other people from my youth, I feel the same way. Gary Gygax, I got to talk to a bunch of times. We were on panels together. We had friendly conversations. He loved some of the stuff I was designing for the realms and would say, make sure he told me so. And then he was gone. He was gone from TSR, but then he was gone. And it was like, no. If I go to a large D&D convention, Gary should be there. There's something wrong with this picture.
Right.
Anyway, we can talk about that all night.
That's true. That kind of brings me up to one thing I wanted to ask you about. I've been doing some thinking back on the books you've written, and one of the characters that stands out to me to be iconic, other than the regular Elminster and things like that, is Chandril.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on her journey, back when she, the daughter of Garthon, so Cult of the Dragon. Then she married up with Narm, and but is there, why did she have to die?
She had to die because editorially at TSR they told me, okay, you're going to write a third Chandril book and you're going to kill her off.
What a terrible answer! Oh, that's awful.
My God.
Oh man, that's awful.
Okay, you must realize
your honesty, but man, is that terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
You must realize that all of the Forgotten Realms novels and all of the game products are works for hire. And once somebody else has purchased the rights to the Forgotten Realms from me, which they did in 1986, they have complete editorial control. They can actually rewrite every word I submit. And I don't get to choose the uber plots of the realms. I can fight for things, we can discuss things, and the process of writing a novel in the later years with TSR became a submit your outline, we'll talk about it, we'll change things, and you start writing when we're both happy with the shape of the story that is laid out, okay? As opposed to, hey Ed, we need a book, we need it in a month, write something. So I went into a lot of projects same with Death of a Dragon, okay? I'm going into that.
That was a big one too.
Yeah, and I went in. I had no choice in that. All I was trying to do was influence how it was cast. I'm trying not to ruin things, but ruin the plots of things. But what I'm trying to do is influence how characters are portrayed in the books, so that they stay true to character. In the same way that, to go back to Marvel Comics for a moment, or DC, or any comic book company. If somebody makes a character behave out of character in order to fit their plot, and that happened for me in the Shadowdale Tantris Waterdeep modules, where they were rewritten in-house to match the changing plots of the novels, which hadn't been written when I had my deadline to hand the modules in, and to have people in Shadowdale in particular behave out of character to fit the plot of the adventure, feels wrong. You have to try and force things so that you end up at the same endpoint that you're intending to end up, but the people portrayed in the book ring true to the way you've drawn them up until then, so that the reader doesn't say, wait a minute, Elminster would never do that,
Right.
You never want that reaction to be there. So you want, and the other thing, the essence of good storytelling, the essence of a good life, is making moral choices. So it's quite all right to have somebody make a difficult moral choice and maybe make a mistake in your estimation, maybe in their own estimation, as they're dying. Oh, I shouldn't have done that, but to make a choice, because that is the real heroics. It's the making a choice and standing up for something, rather than just saying, oh, well, I'm going to go back inside and have another beer. If the orcs kill everyone in the village, nothing I could do.
Nothing I could do about it. Well, that kind of reminds me of when Bob wrote that Star Wars book.
Mm-hmm.
and well, you know who he killed. I'm not going to say
Yes.
it out loud.
Yeah.
And
The fans still pillory him
and
for
they
that.
still no, and I did an interview with him, and I said, "What's the one thing you regret in your writing?" He goes, "That book." He goes, "I thought I had a thick skin until I wrote that book."
Yeah. And of course, he went into it with the same thing. He went into it with editorial dictate. This is what you will do in this novel.
Right.
And he had to do it. For me, I would have loved other opportunities to tell more of Chandrel's story, but then there are so many characters in the realms, from Mert the Moneylender, my original point of view realms character, all the way along, who've been neglected.
Right.
And some of them, like, I never got a chance, while we're in Cormyr, I never got the chance to really have Queen Filfero, on stage enough and be, and if you look at the little series of articles I did for the Wizards website, which you can still find in the archive for 3.5, when she and Azun are using these gate things and hopping places, you get a little bit of the byplay between the two of them to set up each article, and that was my one chance to write Queen Fee and have her be herself, because for most of it she's alone with her husband. She's not being queen in front of the court, and she's not being queen in a moment of crisis in Cormyr's history where she has to be the Ice Queen and do things no matter what. It doesn't matter if she's screaming inside, she has to maintain and I got to show you a little bit of what she was like as a person, teasing her husband, barbed comments with her husband, just having fun, and a bit of the tickle slap and so on, how they got along with each other.
Right.
So the same way, I wanted to show you more of Chandrel and Narn, because the way the novels turned out, I mean, Spellfire had 2/3 of it hit the cutting room floor, because there was a complete change in the book department from when I was asked to write the novel, which was Jeff Grubb saying, "Hey Ed, will you show us the realms in a novel? Just show us everything. Bring everybody on stage. Show us everything so that other people can pick up and run with this kingdom and that character." And then halfway through, oh no, it's going to be this length. Chop. And it was complete new personnel at the book department and everything being done differently. And that's just the luck of the draw. So when it came to Narm, he became like Mr. One Note, because we were looking at Chandrel more than him. And I was trying to show you a guy who was supportive of his lover, of his mate, and being soft and sensitive, because he realizes that's his role. She's the heavy hitter,
And he's okay being that Mr. Mom character.
Yeah, and yet it's really hard to give him enough screen time.
Right.
And even give Chandrel enough screen time, because originally Chandrel was a vehicle, which meant, okay, have somebody who's so powerful that nobody can just kill her, even though she's a young every person. She's an everyman. She's a woman, but she's an everyman. And I wanted deliberately to have a female protagonist, something we hadn't yet done, and I wanted to signal, hey, the realms is for everybody, not just young boys, not just men who want to be young boys for the rest of their lives, like all of us. Hi. No. but for everybody, and at the same time, be important enough, even though she's a nobody from nowhere, that half the realms is coming to get her. They're coming to get her Spellfire, not her. But I mean, they're gonna, because they don't see any way to keep the Spellfire without keeping her as this living person who can wield it. They're all trying to capture her person, or make alliances with her, or fool her into doing something for them, or whatever it is. And so therefore I can bring all these heavy hitters on stage. Manchun, Fazul, all these people are trying to get their hands on Chandrel. And not necessarily for the reason that sounded, but I mean, but I mean, I had to, that was the driver for the plot. And again, as things change, as the saga goes on, I never get the chance. Chandrel becomes this focal point, the eye of the storm, around which the storm rages, and I don't get enough chance to A, give her agency, and B, show you what she's going to do. And in some cases, things get taken away from me. There was a moral choice they didn't want me to have in print, so one novel got completely changed. There is a Chandrel novel in which she fights and destroys a Dracolich at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And originally, it was going to be, she was going to use her Spellfire for healing on Narm and everybody else, And the cost of that was to lose her unborn child she was carrying. She was going to burn him out. And although that was approved at the editorial level when I first started writing the book, when it hit higher ups in the company, oh no, we're not going there. No childbirth, no pregnancy, nothing to do with that, no sacrifices. Oh, no. Just take that right out. So what you got instead was a tacked on, hurriedly written, and I mean really hurriedly written, second Dracolich fight at the end, instead of the original moral thing for the novel, which was going to be there. And then it was going to be, you see, that changes everything.
It does.
If Chandrel has lost her child, I mean, that's going to affect her, and it's going to affect how she behaves from that moment on.
Oh, exactly. I could imagine where the story arc would have gone from that point forward, what would have changed her motivations entirely, possibly.
Yeah, and the other thing was, the Chandrel Saga, which is now, billed and sold as the Chandrel Saga, it was a sort of cobbled together affair. I wrote Spellfire. There was a 7-year gap before I was given a slot to write another Forgotten Realms novel, Crown of Fire. And then it became a series, as opposed to something that was being written as a series. For instance, when Bob started writing about Drizzt, and you have the original Crystal Shard, then you can see the plot laid out for a trilogy right at the beginning. Okay, and this thing sells good. Here's the trilogy, and then they're being written that way. Whereas I was like, Ed, we need you to rush off and detail this part of the realms in game thingy, and now we need you to rush over here and detail this part of the world, because the acute danger, the thing that they were trying to get away from, was Gary Gygax being the bottleneck. They could never develop Greyhawk the way they wanted to because he was too busy.
Yeah.
Writing new rules as a game designer, as he developed D&D, being a CEO of a company that was expanding wildly and dealing with the company, and at the same time bringing Greyhawk into print. So he was a bottleneck because there was only one of him. They knew right from the beginning, because the whole point of buying the realms as opposed to developing another one in-house, because Earth was the one that they didn't want to use anymore. Kryn was the one they developed in-house, and it had taken all the company's resources for 2 years to tell this big epic story. And they wanted, for the cradle of the second edition of the game, a land of 1,000 stories. So they buy the realms, but then make sure Ed doesn't become the bottleneck. Now, it helped that I could work lightning fast, and I had to. But the whole point of it was that they didn't want things to wait on me. And that's one of the reasons why there wasn't an ongoing, steady series of novels, which is one of the reasons why, if you look at Chandrel's story, it's incomplete.
And by example, give everyone a little bit of a perception here. I've heard this answer before, but when you say work lightning fast, how many words a day would you and could you write?
Oh, God. I've never counted them that way, but Elminster, The Making of a Mage was written in 16 days, 8 weekends.
Oh my God.
8 2-day weekends.
But that was 600,000 words.
Yeah, and then chopped back. The year that TSR, the last year that TSR was before Wizards of the Coast, I wrote 11 products that year for TSR. And during that time, I was commuting 110 miles to work, working an 8-hour day, and then commuting 110 miles back every day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, because we work Sundays for one little shift in the winter. And I was living in a century farmhouse with my wife's elderly parents, which meant when we came home, there were always light bulbs, burnt out, taps that were dripping and wouldn't turn off, the animals to feed and all the rest of it, so there was I was running at full speed. And there were times by the end of that year that I was writing this merry sex scene, and I realized I'm writing it in the wrong file. I'm writing this scene, and it's a scene that's never going to be published anyway, because code of conduct, we're not going to go there. We're not going to go through the bedroom door and see what's happening. But I'm writing it, not just for my own, jollies, but because if I write the scene, then I can make sure that I don't have characters moving too quickly, like finishing and moving somewhere else faster. No, I have to write it out and then chop it out, but I know it's there. I know they have done that, and they have taken this amount of time, so they can't therefore get to this other place in the castle or in the Zent headquarters because they're busy elsewhere, And I realize I'm typing this in entirely the wrong file. I'm in a game product file, which doesn't have fictional characters and certainly doesn't have sex scenes in it. Oh dear. But the joy of computers is I can cut it out and lift it. And that was because I was just running at full tilt. And Jeff Grubb was calling me on, again, pre-internet, okay? So phones and FedEx were our friends. And I'd get phone calls at the library when he knew I'd be on desk and would answer. And we were running at full tilt. Now, I am slowing down for 2 or 3 reasons. One of them is me, like everybody gets more things wrong with them when they're older. The other is nursing my wife, she's older. And the other thing is, as the realms and other things build up more stuff, the process of writing things that fit between the cracks and add on to this increasingly large creation, it's slower. At the beginning, like it's like buying 25 acres of bare land. And you could say, okay, I'll have the house over there and the garage over there, and I think I'll have a swimming pool over there and tennis courts over there. I think I'll plant an orchard over there. Nice and easy if you got empty space. But after you built and planted all those things, and then somebody said, can we have a helicopter landing pad? And you scratch your head and wonder where you're going to fit it. Takes a little longer because you've got to work around what's already there. And so that's happened with the realm. So I am slowing down, but I am still working on, at the moment, I have 6 projects on the go, active projects. I am reading and blurbing 3 novels by other people. I am doing tons of other things, short stories. I'm writing tweets every day, and I'm working on other things that are piled up that I want to get to. Creative things that all those years of working on the realms, there were many times which I would get an idea for something and just couldn't do it. So you just jot down the idea and hang on to it for later. And I'm trying to get to some of those before I die.
And Curry, to answer your question, the Elminster Making of a Mage averaged 37,500 words a day.
That's what I had heard before. I heard it was 30,000 plus a day, and that's after making that trip to and from work and then coming home and finding the time to even write.
Exactly.
Yep. And there are many days I go to bed at 3 a.m. because I've got to find the time sometime. And I refuse. And that's the other thing. For all of those of you out there who say, I would really like to write a book, but I can never find the time. You will go to your graves having never written that book. Find the time. If I can do it, you can do it. You may never sleep again because you may be robbing it from, and you have to think, am I safe to drive or operate heavy machinery tomorrow because I didn't sleep? You have to, think of the practicalities of these things, but make the time and do it. And see, to me, that is my mental recreation. That is my blowing off steam. That is what keeps me sane, to sit down at the keyboard and write. I like writing. I don't mean it's always easy, but I like doing it. Some people hate it. They want to be authors. They want to have produced a book, but they hate the period of producing it. I don't. I love it.
Well, that's it shows. It really does. I do want to get to a couple of questions here. And this is by I know
the realms. Remember the realms.
No,
those things. Actually, yeah, exactly.
This is actually more interesting. I have to tell you. Drew Dahmer, she wasn't sure if this is yours or Elaine Cunningham's character, and I'm gonna pronounce it very badly. It's Morelder.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to know if there was any backstory or what you have that wasn't in the book.
Not that I can find off the top of my head. That was a character I named and put there, and there was very little lore about them, and Elaine picked them up and used them, and so the character is in a sense now hers, okay? Because she got the chance to flesh it out. She made Merelda what she needed Merelda to be to tell her story. Now my job, and that's part of sharing the world for the shared world, is not to come along and say, oh, you got it all wrong, let me change it here. My job is to come along and say, okay, that's what Merelda now is. Now I have to develop from there. So I have developed a few little things, but they are on a hard drive over there on my Mac. So I can't share them, but patience, I will hand you something on Merelder. I'm making myself a note here for the fan page.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Drew, did you hear
that? That's great.
You're going to get something on Merelder. That's fantastic. Curry, didn't you have another question by another person from the website?
I do. There's a question from David Fry. He's also a member of the Forgotten Realms Archives Facebook page. His question is, did the religion of the Adama in the Shining Lands survive the time of Trouble's spell plague and still exist in the DR 1490s?
The answer to that would be yes. But I know almost nothing of the details because that was in a geographical area that I haven't been concentrating on. Others have been, so I've been leaving it to them. And that's part of sharing the world. I stay out of some people's way as they're developing stuff. So again, I would have to go and look stuff up. But yes, that was actually something that was discussed at the summit, the Sundering Summit, and it was agreed that yes, just in passing. So I can therefore answer yes, but I can't tell you much of anything else, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
That's fair enough. I also have one here. I'm not sure who asked this, but it was about Eversalt. They were particularly the lesbian couple that ruled pre-4th edition.
Yes. Who are dead now of old age. Both of them. They raised a family. Obviously, neither of them fathered. And the nature of Eldersalt, it isn't like a hereditary dynasty of rulers in the first place. Yeah, that was actually a source of some secret amusement on my part. I had studied the realms with same-sex couples and so on because that was just the way I saw some of those people. It's not as a cultural thing. It's just that in the same way that if you read The Lord of the Rings, men cry a lot and they're not looked down upon for doing so because culturally that's okay. It's not the North American stiff upper lip, stuff doesn't apply. And so I had put in all sorts of things to represent all sorts of real world gamers I knew.
Right.
So that there'd be a nod to them. Because, I've been going to Gen Con regularly since Gen Con 17. Until 3 years ago, I hadn't missed one. Before that, it was Gen Con 13. Before that, it was Gen Con 8 for me. And for all those Gen Cons, I'd seen a lot of people that we would describe in general phrases social misfits. They were handicapped in some way, they were ugly, they were overweight, they were underweight, they were transgendered, they had visible mutilations, whatever. Right. And yet they were welcome as gamers around the table. And over the years, I saw more and more females who were gamers, and I saw more and more people whose skins weren't white who were gamers. And the Realms was already this huge tapestry, deliberately. And I made sure there were examples of some of that stuff in positions of power. And certain people at TSR who were white Anglo-Saxon men, straight arrows,
right,
took them all out again or changed them. So that particular lesbian couple was one of the few that snuck through that somebody didn't catch and change the gender of.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah, there were a lot of stamping out. And the point is not to rub your face in, oh my goodness, there are lesbians. Oh my goodness, they're trying, No, it's that everybody's here. It's everything is in the realms. If you don't like it and don't want it in your campaign, don't use it. Right. But it's there for people who do want it. And it also, and Wizards of the Coast is going very much in this direction. You'll notice in the 5th edition stuff, when you're flipping through the player's handbook and so on, and they're showing you the character classes, the people who are in those character classes aren't all human, and they all look different. They're not all pale-skinned,
Right.
Yeah, they're everybody. And without rubbing your face in, it's just to say, see, anybody can be anything, which means you can encounter anybody being anything in the realms. So it leads to better role-playing because someone walks up to you, you don't know if they're the guard, you don't know if they're a bad guy who's going to jump you, and you don't know if they're the king or queen out slumming to go buy their favorite booze, So they put on old clothes and gone out into the streets. You don't necessarily know that. So therefore, when you're role-playing, you have to, if you're going to be a reckless guy who kills everybody they meet, on your head is going to be it in short order. But it leads to more interesting role playing because you never know who any of these people are, just as in real life. It makes you be more alert and more mindful of how you're behaving, as opposed to we grow up in North America, in the structures, like you attend school, and you look up, oh, that's a teacher. Oh, they have to be obeyed. Those are all fellow students like me. And you can stop thinking about it. You can draw in on yourself, and you can concentrate on what you're supposed to be studying or your own friends or whatever, and just ignore it, because you know what people are by their uniforms and by where they are and so on. Well, in the realms, it's different. Anybody could be anything. And that's sort of the richness. And, if we're going to have these fantasy settings where magic works and dragons talk, and there are halflings and dwarves and quicklings and sprites and pixies, and then let's use the richness. Or at least, if we're publishing a setting, let's have it there. And then it becomes a buffet that individual gamers can pick from and use just what they want in their campaign. But if we haven't laid the table in the buffet, if you go to the buffet and all that's there is cold hamburgers and bananas, well, I guess you're having cold hamburgers and bananas.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, I can't eat bananas, I'm allergic to them. Oh, I guess you don't get a dessert. Oh, I can't eat cheese, I'm allergic to it. Well, you can scrape it off some of those burgers, but otherwise you're out of luck, man. And I don't want that to be your experience of the realms or anything I write. I want you to say, oh, there's something in here for me. There's something in here for everybody. There's a new way of looking things, a new way of thinking, which is why so many of those little epic fantasy stories I tell on Twitter, they have twists. They make you look at things a different way. The
Right.
humans aren't always the good guys, and it's deliberately say, hey, have you thought about it from this direction? I kick open the door. Yeah, but how does the door feel?
Right.
Nobody thought of the door's feelings. I like that. I have another one here from Rick Day. He says in the last book of the Nethril trilogy, it has a cryptic ending about the Rengarth barbarians becoming another ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
But it just says that that's another story. Is there any light you can shed on this?
No, I can't. That's NDA'd.
Of course, the dreaded NDA.
That was okay. The whole Arcane Age stuff was a line, a subline, and it came to an end, and we missed the opportunity. We mean TSR. I was never an employee, but I was working with all the people, so they're my friends. They're we to me. We missed the chance to. That was going to be another story, another series of novels, and then chance to. But we all signed NDAs, and that is a loose end that could be picked up perhaps by a licensee in today's day and age. So I can't spoil it. It's not mine to spoil. But yeah, that's a loose end, and one of my unwritten rules for the realms that everybody had to follow, one of the few design dictates I managed to get TSR to adopt, so it became an official one, is for every loose end you tie off in the realms, I need 3 new loose ends built in, added, so the realms always feels alive. So if you're telling stories, particularly big epic stories, that tie off things, that settle who rules a kingdom, or destroy a great villain, or change, then it's going to feel finished, done, unless you give me new things. So that's a loose end that never got tied off. So you could do anything you want in your campaign, but it's NDA for me to comment on, because it could theoretically be picked up.
Right. No, I understand that. No, that's completely acceptable. Another character for me that was so iconic and would love to have heard more about was Elminster Scribe.
Leo.
Oh,
Leo.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
One of my favorites.
Oh my God, his parts were just perfectly written, I think, in your novels, and I always wanted more. I left his scenes going, but and
Okay, so Leo got picked up and used by Victor Milan and others in novels in Tethir, so he had another life after that. And in game terms, that was covered by Steve Shend when he did Lands of Intrigue.
Right.
We also saw Leo in the comics that were scripted by Jeff Grubb, published back in the day by DC. The Forgotten Realms comic, Leo appears. And the Leo that appears there was visually modeled on Warren Spector, who was then an executive at TSR. Mm-hmm. And who moved on to other gaming companies, and remained Jeff's friend. They remained in contact and so on. But he wasn't making Leo be Warren. He was just borrowing Warren's looks for Leo. And he was making Leo be himself, his own character. And I wanted to, for me, the whole point of Leo was to underscore to people that there are spear carriers in this world who are spear carriers because they want to be. Like, be careful when you slap that shoeshine boy off the thing because you're a big, strong adventurer, because that shoeshine boy might just be higher level than you are.
Right.
He just wants to be a shoeshine boy.
That's a great point.
That is a great point.
And Leo, Leo got used for comic relief often. You can't get to see Elminster or Leo will run interference, like the secretary who will never let you into the boss's inner office, sort of thing. But I also wanted Leo to always have this, to remind you without shoving it in your face, but to always be there, just as Alfred the Butler in the various Batman interpretations of him. He's obviously something more than just a butler. In some versions of the Batman story, he was Bruce Wayne's mentor. He trained Bruce Wayne, so he may act as the butler, but he's more than just a butler, And in the same way, Leo is more than just the scribe. He has his own story, he has his own secrets. And he's the guy who says, will that be your number 3 dragon-slaying wand, my lord? I just happened to bring it. And then he whips open his coat, and like the old stereotypical thing when I was a kid. Want to buy a watch, son? And the guy opens his coat, and there's like 52 watches hanging there, Leo would be the guy, he could unfurl his thing, and he'd say, oh dear, I suppose she'd better get out of the pool and accompany you. And she probably doesn't want to, meet all of these nobles in the raw. I just happen to take the liberty of bringing panties, a brassiere, a top. I always carry them, and he'd be the guy who'd always have all this stuff. And, you need to have writing materials. Here you go, sir. You need to have a pretext for what you were fixing. Here's what you were fixing, so you can pretend that's what you were doing. Here's the tools, here's the thing, and you came down here to fix this. Not to have a good cry, to fix this. Leo would always be the guy who would be like Alfred the Butler, who would always be on the spot with the right thing. The perfect butler.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Let it be known in your campaign's future from this point forward that Leo is a walking bag of holding.
Yes, he is. Oh, yes. He has all sorts of... He has the knockout pills. He has the Band-Aids. The irritating scoutmaster who had all the stuff that you forgot? The shoelaces, the safety pins? Leo is that guy. He just happens to have a complete sewing kit. He just happens to have a spare codpiece. He wears 2, one over the other. You can have the outer one. And in between the 2 codpieces, there's a thin layer of kindling. He keeps it dry.
Oh, wow.
My God.
So when you're in the drenching rainstorm, he produces it.
I just happen to have some dry kindling right here, my lord.
Yes.
Part me while I grab my wood.
Yes. Storm keeps hers under her boobies, but they aren't as dry. Because that's a moist, heated area.
Well, it is known that boob sweat is good for starting fires.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I always want to do that with every sort of character. I want every character to have a little surprise depth. They did it in, to go back to Marvel Comics, there was a story in the X-Men comics where they suddenly find themselves on the docks in Japan, and a piece of newspaper blows by, and Wolverine picks it up and says here, and somebody says, I didn't know you could read Japanese. He says, you never asked, but... it's those little moments, and they in the Lord of the Rings movies, in the Hobbit movies, when the unexpected party begins, and Bilbo is getting quite surprised when all these dwarves are knocking on his door. And, of course, the filmmaker's challenge was to make those dwarves different from one another.
Right.
Because you've got these huge amount of dwarves, and they're all just dwarf number 1, dwarf number 2. But you want to make them different, so they are all doing things that surprise Bilbo, and surprise the reader. They're not all... there's one who's young and handsome, doesn't have a beard,
Oh, the one that was, he's like, would you like a light chamomile?
Yes, yeah. There's one with the hearing trumpet. They're all different, and because they're being differentiated, they had the capacity to surprise you. And it wasn't just Leo I wanted to have hidden depths, it was everybody.
Right.
To do things. I like having the... because this was the thing that used to get me in real life. I grew up in a very wealthy neighborhood. And often the millionaire, who in some cases was a titled noble from England who'd left, if you ask the old guy covered with dirt and grass stains and old sweater with the elbows out, which way to the Earl, he might say you're talking to him.
Right.
Or he might say, oh, you go up there, take the drive, and you take the drive and you go in and ask, and the butler would say, just a moment, he's out in the garden. And then the same old guy would come ambling in,
Yeah, no, and, it's funny because we had a guy who lived in a town in Texas where I grew up. He drove a pickup truck that was 100,000 miles past needed to be destroyed, and he never shaved. He didn't look like he bathed or washed his clothes. He was always kind of bent over on his truck driving around on 3 low tires and 1 flat one, and he would drive around, but he was the richest guy in town.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have known it if you stopped and talked to him.
Yeah, and I like turning expectations on their heads. When you're role-playing at the gaming table, it's one of the best things to make role players, like I was saying earlier, about assuming things and just, oh, those are all students, those are all teachers. It's the best thing for making them say, wait a minute, I can't trust anything. The world is stranger than you think. Oh my goodness, I better stay awake and alive. and that, which is a great thing for our real lives. If you sleepwalk through life, you'll miss half the fun.
Well, make you pay attention more, at least.
Yeah. I once was at a really expensive restaurant in downtown Toronto, and I was surrounded by business types lunching. And there was this gorgeous woman in a pinstripe suit who was the legal secretary for a bunch of high-priced lawyers. And they said, make a note of that, make a note of that, make a note of that. And then they all got up, poured their drinks down their gullets, and rushed off, leaving her at the table. And she's looking around because she has nothing to write on. And you see her look down at the tablecloth, which is a white cloth, expensive tablecloth. Look at it wistfully, but she can't write on it. It's not hers. And I catch her eye and come over and hand her a pen. And I have only one piece of paper with me because you might find a writer naked and in the bath, but he'll always have something to write on within reach. So I had something, and I handed it to her, and she wrote on it, and then she'd run out of things. She thanked me, and then she waited until nobody was looking, and she hikes her skirt up, and on the side of her thigh, she writes the rest of the stuff in pen, then pulls her skirt back down and hands me the pen back.
That's commitment right there.
And I think that's brilliant, And I like people to have these little, she solves things. I once watched another one with this elderly, very dignified lady dressed to the nines. I'd say she was probably 67, 68 years old, in her Sunday best, at a funeral. And they had to do this thing with a procession, and the door wouldn't stay open. Its doorkeeper thing had lost its pressure. And where she kept opening it, propping it, and she'd get 10 feet away from it and it would close again. And I watched her do this 3 times, and I'm thinking, we should go up there and help her. But, you don't. You're part of the congregation, not part of it. And then she walks over to it, takes off her stiletto heel, pushes the door open, rams her stiletto heel between the door and its frame, so that when it tries to close, it closes on her shoe and jams half open. Takes off the other stiletto heel so she won't be walking lopsided, rams it in beside the first so she's now in her stocking feet, and calmly goes back to her seat. Problem solved. And you go, cool, people are great. I got to put that in a book.
Exactly. I have another question here from Spike Murphy. He asks, what is the Second Sundering, and are the realms essentially operating in a post-apocalyptic society after the past 100 years?
Okay, the Second Sundering. Okay, the Sundering is what happens when Abir and Toril come into conjunction and then pull apart again. And when they pull apart, it's called the Sundering. This has happened before, it's happening again.
Right.
It has just finished happening, as we come to now in the realm's time. As we're approaching 1500s DR, the Sundering has finished, and the Sundering novels, and I happen to write the last one, The Herald, by sort of 3-4 months after the end of that novel, the worlds have pulled apart again. And presumably a beer, although we can no longer see it, is settling down, and definitely Toro is settling down. It's settling down into a new normal. Things have changed, meaning metagame meeting. This was their chance to change anything they didn't like by removing it and substituting something else. And you can do the same as a dungeon master, okay? But is it post-apocalyptic? It depends on where you are in the realms. If your entire kingdom went away and everyone you knew and loved, and if you happen to come from a magic-using family and all of your friends went mad or died or their heads literally exploded and nothing's left, then yeah, it's an apocalypse and you're in a post-apocalyptic world. For most of the realms, it just means those annoying, dangerous magic users aren't around anymore.
Right.
But wait,
That's a good
they're coming
point.
back.
Sure.
Yeah. If you were keeping your head down as a farmer, if you were in ground zero and it really affected your farm, like your farm went away, your country went away, yeah, it was a major thing. If it didn't, no, it was just another period of strife and tumult, and haven't we had enough of those?
Oh my God, really?
Like the time of troubles. You know, it's the gods walk the earth. Meanwhile, the stock market's gone down 2 points, and you know, and everybody in the local tavern drains their tankard and said, "Yeah, and taxes are going up. So what else is new?"
What else is new?
You know, because it's just one more blah, blah, thing. It's always one more thing. You know, because
Right.
they are survivors and they've come to realize that they don't live in a safe society because unlike our real world, none of them have ever been cosseted enough to not know there are bad things going on. Like dragons coming down out of the sky and devouring entire herds of cattle that you were like counting on to eat yourself next year or sell.
Right.
You know? So they and you know, there are orc hordes. If you're in the Sword Coast North, whoa, we're overdue for another orc horde, which will come south, destroying and pillaging everything in its path. And of course, because that wasn't what we wanted to have on stage in the published realms, we're overdue for an orc horde, just the same way that California is overdue for another huge quake.
Right.
It could happen at any time. You know, so they know that they live in a dangerous world. So depending on where you were in the realms, things are settling back down now, and people are getting on with their lives. And it's a new normal, which is why there are new adventures for you to play in. Published adventures, I mean, or make up your own. You know, the realms is remarkably resilient. People, not just humans, people of all races bounce back and they keep living. This is what they do, because the alternative is to die, and some of them don't want to yet.
Right.
You know, my favorite realms character is the farmer who sees the army coming and says, "Hey, could you wait until after dinner?" Because the wife's got a really nice roast in there, and
Yeah.
I haven't had roasts for a month. So will you let me eat half of it before you gut me? You can eat the rest of the half when I'm dead, okay?
Sure.
Yeah. they got
That's
that
great.
sort of attitude, you know.
Oh, that's terrific. And this kind of goes along with it. He also, Spike Murphy also had another question along the same lines. Is that how long were the gods actually absent during the Second Sundering, and how did this impact daily life in the temples? Like what happened to the temples, and did everyone return to worship the gods, or is there a significant population of the willfully godless now?
Okay, there are. To answer the last part first, yes, there are some who say, no more gods for me. They weren't there for me when I needed them, so I'm not there for them. That which is different from not believing in them. They still believe in them. They just don't think they're worthy of worshiping anymore.
Right.
You know, no, I'm done with all that. When we needed you, you weren't there. The rest of the time you're there telling us what to do and what not to do, telling us we can't eat, you know, this on this day, and telling us we got to celebrate this feast the other day, but you weren't there when I wanted you, so what good are you? You know, so there is that. But most people are back to worshiping things. In most of the temples, they couldn't get spells above third level, you know, because nobody was answering the prayers. How long that was for, it depends on who you were and where you were. It varied. It was just chaos. The major chaos was amongst arcane magic users, the weave collapsing, okay? So, and because people there were going mad, or killing themselves, or getting killed in calamities that occurred because long-standing magic collapsed. And if you use magic to build a castle and it suddenly collapsed, crushing everybody inside, you know. But things, how long the gods were away for, varied across the realms. But we're talking at least a month and a bit, not afternoon, not darn, I can't get the TV reception. I hope it'll be back in time for the big game 2 days from now. No, it was nothing like that. It was longer, and it was great widespread panic, but everything varied, and we deliberately leave it everything varied so that a dungeon master can spin it the way they want for their campaign.
Right.
Even if it's only his backstory, even if it's not on stage, we want it to be the way the stories they want to tell. Because they may want to bring a new god that they've invented to the fore, or a god they've transplanted from something else they bought that isn't even in the realms. But they want to, oh, this sounds good, I want to do this. And shift the portfolios of the deities that are there, or downplay them. And the other thing is, there was an in-house directive to put your characters more at the fore. The people who are strong movers and shakers, like the Chosen, should step more into the background. You see, this was a difference in editorial slant, because in the earlier TSR days, it was, tell me the stories of all these big movers and shakers, have them on stage like superheroes in spandex. I want to see, and now it's no, pull them back so that people's player characters can shine. And of course, that's what's happened. Laeral is now Open Lord of Waterdeep. She's tied down to ruling rather than adventuring. Elminster is, at the moment, tied down to being head of the city watch and working for her, not wandering around handing out magic and bamfing in, zapping somebody and saying, whoa, Mr. I want you to do that, and then bamfing out again. In other words, Elminster's been put into the same situation that Vangradahast was in for years. If this kingdom's going to survive, I have to do everything myself. And of course, Vangradahast could be your bad guy, and the J. Edgar Hoover type, who begins to equate his personal preferences for the way he wants Cormyr to be with what is good and best for Cormyr. And you may, particularly if you're a noble of Cormyr, really disagree with that. Right. We don't want these war wizards telling us what to do, and Vangradahast spying on everything we do. So this comes down to it. Do you want to have the FBI spying on your name? But are they necessary? You see, first of all, you don't have any choice. They're there. They're going to be doing it. The question is, how do you regard them? Do you need them? Do they stand there? Are they a necessary evil? This sort of thing. And there's no right answers to that. That's the thing you want to put in front of people to think about in their campaign play and in their stories, so they can all have their different takes on it. And that means people like Elminster and Laeral are now more pinned down, and they're going to be fixtures rather than the movers and shakers, so that your player characters can be the movers and shakers. And that's just fine. That's not my take or druthers. That's what the company has decided, who is publishing the world. And my job is to give them the best stories they can under the directives they give me each time.
Right. Oh, that makes absolute sense. Curry, do you have any more questions from anybody?
No, just one of my own, if you'll indulge me, Ed.
I indulge everyone.
Okay, great. Let's stretch out a little bit here.
I'll get the patch kit.
Let's talk about things outside of this world in particular, but I would say grandchildren at the very best. Different types of media, like online games, for instance, World of Warcraft, or television shows like Stranger Things. Do you find the time to enjoy any of those?
Not enough, because so much of my time is for instance, publishers or my friends who are writers will send me novels and say, could you blurb this for me? And I say, great, yes, of course, because I get to read the novel. It's now okay for me to take the time because it's work. If you know what I mean.
Sure.
So it's sort of okay. In terms of watching things on television and so on, I must admit I get to watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, little clips and snippets.
Okay.
And I buy a lot of DVDs, which I would love to get to watch someday. Mm-hmm. I have not yet mastered how to record things on my current satellite PVR, DVD, whatever they call it, although others in the household have, because I never have the time. So I am right back to the way I was when I first started watching television when television was black and white, and there were 4 networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, and the Canadian CBC. That was it. There were no other, there were no satellites, there was no cable, and there was no time shifting or recording. You watched something live, because television was live, and people were performing on stage and fluffing their lines and singing off key live.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can still remember 8 minutes of hilarity when they were doing Don Amici's Takes You to the Circus, and there was live performances from circuses, and an elephant took a dump
Sure. Yeah.
for like 8 minutes. It was a big dump, and the cameraman kept panning away, and he'd pan away to someone in the crowd, and they'd be laughing hysterically, and then he'd pan to somebody else, and they'd be laughing, and he'd pan to somebody else. They had their hands over their mouth, killing him. They'd pan back to the elephant, which had this frown of concentration, and you know, but because it was live, you know. So I'm back to that stage where I walk in, and if something's on, or while I'm boiling the kettle to make tea for myself and my wife, I go in and flip on the cable and watch like 15 seconds of something on a station that I might, you know, the DIY network or whatever, you know, where I might see somebody restoring a house. So I can come in the middle and just watch a few seconds of them going, I thought we put marble all over here, but it's a load-bearing wall. Crash. You know, and then I can walk away saying, oh, that was fun. Or cute baby animal pics from the wild, you know, as opposed to seeing the cheetah chase down and kill and eat something one more time, you know. So yeah, I don't get a chance to enjoy a lot of the stuff, but I make an effort to zero in on things that I really want to see. The Lord of the Rings movies, for instance, something that interests me that might be good. There's a new movie out right now called The Kid Who Would Be King, and which was King Arthur in modern day, and I wanted to see what they do with it, you know, that sort of thing. And Stranger Things falls in the same category. Oh, this could be great. I want to see how they handle it. And things that I very much wanted to see the prequel movies, The Crimes of Grindelwald and so on, for Harry Potter, because the first one, it was, to me, the most wonderful thing about that movie was unlikely people. You have a hero and heroine who are nervous. They're not extroverts. They're not good at talking to other people. They're not good at communicating. And that was a fascinating thing I wanted to see. I wanted to see how they developed Game of Thrones, having read the books. Years and years ago, I was TSR's pet author at ABA, now known as Book Expo America. It hadn't yet started to move from place to place or change its name. It was always in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Brian Thompson was head of TSR Books department. I arrived, found the booth, you know, their booth where I was supposed to be, and he said, come with me. And we started off across the convention floor, and he went to the Bantam booth. The hall wasn't yet open to the public, and they were about to make the announcement. And we stood there in front of a pillar, and around the pillar was stacked up copies of the Game of Thrones, brand new in hardcover. We smiled at the Bantam people, they smiled at us. The announcement said, the hall is now open, and Brian and I both leaned forward and took a free copy of the Game of Thrones and scuttled back to where we were supposed to be with them. That was our loot for attending the convention, because, you know, I had always read George Windhaven that he'd written with Lisa Tuttle and so on, and I wanted to see what he'd do with this sort of a story, because this could be like really cool. And it is really cool when brought to the small screen, but it's also different. So I get to look at because I'm always learning my craft, and to see the changes they made from books to the screen, and why. In the same way that I wanted to see why they telescoped Lord of the Rings. Why is Tom Bombadil gone? You know, why are the three endings telescoped into one? Why don't I get my Scouring of the Shire? You know, to see why they make the decisions they make for what works on screen and what doesn't.
Right. And
that's helped me, because, you know, I've written Forgotten Realms comics. I've scripted them, and the difference between what you do on the page and what you do in a comic book, a different medium. You tell a story in a different way. The actor who plays Mark Harmon, who plays Jethro Gibbs in NCIS, was once interviewed, and he was talking about how he knows when a script isn't right. He says, "You made my character talk too much," because Leroy Jethro Gibbs is a man of few words, and if the writer is trying to make him advance the plot by explaining things or pushing the other characters into doing things too often, then no, you're changing the character to fit your plot, not the other way around. Make your plot work with the characters we already know and love. Anyway.
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
I got another question here. Spike Murphy has a lot of questions. So
That's okay. I just feel that, we're not talking enough about the realms. But anyway.
No, this is about you, Ed. This doesn't have to be about only the realms.
Oh, about me. Well, I'm still sexy, the few bits of me that still work.
Just prop him up in the corner. He'll be
okay. That's right. Yeah. Send a couple thousand volts through me and I'll go, whoa! Yeah, he's still alive.
This, which I haven't heard of this place in a long time. He wants to know if the dwarven asteroid kingdom of Whitestone is still in the realm space, and if it is, do they still travel to Mount Hot? Was it Hotnow?
Hotnow. Yes.
Hotnow for any excursions.
And the answer to both those things would be yes. It is still flourishing. Little known secret. This is one of the keys to the survival of the dwarven race, because if you're a clan that's very beleaguered, and particularly in the time when when dwarves were having great difficulty having children and enough children, their birth rate was too low to maintain the population. If they had people who had lost one parent or both, and the clan was in a precarious position, it was on the move, it had lost its holdings, they were being harried by orcs or hobgoblins, they would quite often get to that excursion and give the kids to the dwarves to take away and rear in relative safety elsewhere. In the same way that some elves would give key elves into the keeping of Evermeet so they wouldn't be killed off.
Right.
Because they were too essential, either to a lineage or bloodline, or because they were a brilliant inventor, and in the elves that usually meant an inventor of magical things, a crafter of new magic. They would get them into a place of safety, and that was one of the havens for the dwarves. That's one of the keys to how the race has so improbably survived, with the Underdark so full of monsters trying to kill them.
Right. I'd actually it's one of the areas I'd never really heard much about.
Yes, and you see, we put in little sidelines everywhere, in little vest pocket hidey holes, like the Elminster can visit my house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if he wants something to be preserved and taken out of the realms, he arrives in my woods, buries it, and then comes to see me and drink my ale and stuff, and then takes off, and I have no idea I'm now the custodian of something important that he can come along and dig up afterwards. And it's not in the realms for anyone else to find. So if Manchun and others are looking for it, it isn't there.
Right.
But it's still around, and he can retrieve it when he needs it. I put in lots of stuff like that all over the realms because it gives a dungeon master an excuse. You thought you'd killed the last of the Wallawonga tribe, but there is one more. The Luke, I am your father, moment. How did that happen? How did they miss one? Well, it was stashed somewhere else on another world and another plane, and
that makes yeah.
For the last 18 years, the last prince that you've been searching for has been trapped in treant form, but he's damn tired of it and wants to come home.
They keep trying to chop me down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, I have one here from George Crashos. It's only one word.
Yes.
And it's Tazir.
Yes. George wants me to find and share my entire City of Tazir article, which I did for Dragon, and then the license was pulled for Dragon, and it never saw the light of day. I just did Krumr, the first city. I had a whole approved list of cities, and by approved, I submitted them to the editor. The editor turned around and submitted them to Phil Athens, in-house, and Phil Athens said, yeah, these are all okay. And then I started working on them. And Tazir had a complete map, its banners. It had something like 80,000 words written on Tazir, including a tour of the place. And I knew it was going to get chopped right down just to the tour, because Dragon was a print magazine. You couldn't just infinitely expand it. And in that chaos, the various portions of the article got to various places, and I had two different computers, their hard drives fry, and at the same time, because I'd kept everything on Yahoo, my Yahoo account, I had saved thingies, and Yahoo lost a whole bunch of years worth of stuff there. It just vanished out of our accounts.
Oh no.
And the all the backups were gone, and there's a gap there. So I've been trying to reproduce it by the print from the printouts, and I have to find all the printouts. George visited me, and he saw the glory that are my trailers full of boxes full of stuff.
Yes, I saw the pictures.
Yeah, and there's going to be years of my life digging through those. But you see, again, there's only one of me, and there's always something pressing. And there's no way I'm going out there when it's like 20 below zero in the dark, because there's no wiring and lighting in those trailers, and humping boxes and sorting through them. So that's going to be when it's a sunny day in spring or summer, when I can turn out a box at a time. And if I wasn't so busy doing other stuff that is of the now for the realms of my other creative projects, I would have resurrected to zero already. So please, George, be assured I am still on the hunt. And I am on the hunt for lots of other things. I see here on my desk a bunch of stuff I have to find for you, because you sent me an email, and because I printed it out, and I am working away and finding these things. Because, there's only one of me. And because Caesar must be all things to all men.
That's right. So must Ed.
Yeah, you should see the attachments.
Oh my gosh. We had talked earlier back and forth in our messaging about areas of the realms that people want to know more about. And I've got a good list here. Of course, you can pick anything you want, but people have also been asking to have a pronunciation.
Oh, that's a good one. That's really good.
So it's like for me, it's always going to be Menzoberranzan, not Menzoberranzan.
Menzoberranzan, yeah. Here's the thing. From place to place in the realms, particularly depending on what your mother tongue was, and by mother tongue, I mean not necessarily human, orcs, dwarves, they have different sounds, fricatives, glottal stops, that are frequently used in their languages that aren't frequently used in most human tongues. And how that translates, and you can hear it in our real world by hearing somebody whose mother tongue is French pronounce English, they often get the vowels pronounced differently.
Right.
And from place to place in the States, what is known as a Southern drawl will be usually different emphasis on syllables and different vowel sounds. And you can tell when somebody's from Boston, because of the way, again, the vowels. So from place to place in the realms, people pronounce words differently. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily right or wrong. But yes, to me, it's always been Menzoberranzan.
Right. And if you talk to, Bob pronounces it Menzoberranzan.
Yep. And that's,
right.
Yeah, because he's taking the point of view of how the drow who live there.
Right. Or like Mistra. I call it Mistra. Some people call it Maestra.
Yeah, Mistra to me. Mistra as in mystery, as in Our Lady of Mysteries.
Right. Exactly. But
yeah, there was I think it was for Audible, the narrator of one of my books kept saying Maestra. And I kept yelling at the speaker, "It's not your straw, it's everybody's straw."
Okay, well, full disclosure, if we're being honest here, up until 2 seconds ago, it was always Laheo for me.
Right, exactly.
But you see, again, it's how you pronounce the diphthongs. There are a bunch of place names in the realms deliberately different from what we are used to in English. So, I mean, there are many English-sounding place names like Stonebridge, portmanteaus of two words that we're used to. So we're pretty good on, okay, Stonebridge is going to be pronounced Stonebridge. Got it. But if you look, say, in Thesk, and you see there's one city, Phent, and the city near it is Phsant, and it's Fuent and Sant.
Huh.
Okay. But if you're a visiting merchant from Cormyr, you may go Fent and Sant, or Passant.
Right.
And the merchant you're talking to might correct you, or might not even bother, just smile and nod his head, because he knows the place you're talking about, and he'll just move along without correcting you, depending on, what he's like as a person, or whether he's going to jump down your throat. It's Murgom!
Yeah.
Don't you mispronounce. Some people care and some people don't. Some people just want to make a sale. Hey, you want to buy this or do you not want to buy this?
Exactly. No, it's no soup for you.
Yeah, if you're paying for them, they can be from Fwent or Fent or anywhere you want, as long as you buy them.
That's true. Yeah, the customer's always right. That's right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can go through pronunciations, but the point is, it's probably better if I do it in context, in style, rather than long lists.
No, exactly. No, that's what I meant. Is like when we talk about a place.
Sure, by all means.
Tethiamar. I pronounced it Tethamar.
Yeah, Tethiamar.
Right, Tethiamar.
Tethiamar. Yeah, but you see, but who knows? Because it's a lost fallen kingdom, and if you're not a dwarf,
No, that's true. That's true. So I have a long list of places and that people want to know more about or what happened to them because they're all part of at Abir Toral. So one of them was the biggest one. I think you saw it on the website was Karator.
Karator, yes.
People want to know what happened to it. There was some books written on it, or some modules, or I don't remember because it's been such a long time ago. But then nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Time for my little sermon on this. All of you out there who pay any attention to the realms have probably noticed that the official Wizards of the Coast D&D products set in the realms, written now in 5th edition, have thus far stuck to the Sword Coast region. And this seems to be to me as an outsider, with my foot in the door, but not on staff, this seems to be a deliberate approach of this area will be our sandbox. So other parts of the realms are for individual dungeon masters to play in, and for third-party licensees to set things in without having official D&D products, like novels, for instance, be in the way. So if for your computer game, or your movie, or your comic book, or your bendable hand puppet, or your lunchbox, you want things in Lurin, or Var the Golden, or the Shar, or whatever to be this way, you can just do it. That was part of the addition, the century time jump, is to make the realms more accessible and without all the weight of the past lore. And so places that I'm not working in, and places that aren't official Wizards of the Coast stuff, many of them are NDA'd. So if I know about stuff that's coming out that's set somewhere else, I can't say anything about it.
Right.
You can never, when you're, working with Wizards as an outsider, your NDA always means you can't talk about forthcoming future releases. You could speculate, but if you know something, you can't talk about it. So getting me to detail this, that, or other city or realm or region of the realms is a doomed endeavor. I'm not going to play that game.
Right.
What I'm telling you is how I see locales in the realms being right now as the 1400s come to an end and the 1500s are about to start, which means how I would design and DM and write about them, design for them, DM them. So as far as I know, character is still there. I can't, it's NDA'd.
Right.
From my point of view, I have never liked things being bolted onto the realms that are too much like our real-world historical cultures. It was what TSR wanted to do from the beginning. I mean, the white paper that Jeff Grubb wrote before they bought the realms, the proposal for a unified game world for the second edition of the game, listed we want to have jungle adventures, pirate adventures, Arabian adventures, Arctic adventures, and sure enough, we got them all. El Khadim, Oriental Adventures was on the list, and we actually got a book called Oriental Adventures. But I mean, it was always intended because it was their shorthand for understanding an area that this is sort of like, and we had two senior designers, Doug Niles and Seb Cook, who were former history teachers. They knew this stuff. They felt comfortable in it, and they knew about the cool things, stories they could tell. I think there were sometimes we went over the line. We put the Dalai Lama into the realms. We being TSR. I opened that module and went, what? This is a real life guy in the world, Yeah,
Right.
You're just presuming on the fact that he's like saintly and so on, that he wouldn't sue your socks off, because you really shouldn't.
Right.
It's like putting John Wayne, the actor, in the realms when he's still alive and can sue you, and don't be surprised if he does.
They kind of did that. I can't remember which module that was, but Jeff probably knows the answer to this. There was a particular module that was pretty much a John Wayne movie that was converted into a Dungeons and Dragons.
It was called Kidnapped.
Yeah, but you see, that's different than putting the man into the realms.
No, that's true.
That's what I'm getting at. And to me, that's always, it's sloppy and it's a mistake in style. Right. It makes you think, I want to be in this fantasy world. Don't put something from the real world in it. It feels lazy. It feels like it doesn't fit, and it will lead to improper role-playing assumptions. Like, if people are thinking with their real-world historian hats on, you get the guy sitting across the table saying, but the stirrup wasn't invented until, so it wouldn't... Which means his mind is being pulled out of the immersive story that you're building together around the gaming table. And there's no need to bring up that situation where that could happen if you just make things different enough.
There's always that annoying character at the table that has a reason to disbelieve.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, from my point of view, I never liked character being that like a real world simulation. Even if it's a fantasy version of it, it felt too close for me. But as far as I know, and as far as I can talk about, it's still there.
Okay. All right. I know one place you can talk about is Telflam.
Ooh, Telflam. Yes. Oh boy, here we go. So, you all know where Telflam is on the map.
Yes.
Those who haven't found it yet, I'll wait. Go and look at it. Yeah, I'll wait. Okay, so, many things were shaken up in our Century Time jump with the spell plague and so on. And Telflam was one of them. So, the news for what's changed in Telflam from the last time you've seen it, and I think the last time it was like covered in print, was in the 4th edition Forgotten Realms guide, the base book for 4th edition. I think there are 2 pages on Sesk that have Telflam in it, in its own entry. Okay, so using that as the basis, here's what's happened. Internal strife. What caused the internal strife? The causes remain publicly mysterious, but the Zhang monks, that's how you pronounce that, the Zhang monks, Xiang, Zhang, for those of you out there doing their pronunciation guide, the Zhang monks are fighting amongst themselves, and their temple is burned, ruined, and abandoned. There have been heavy losses amongst them, they're martial monks, remember, and they're scattered all over Thesk and both nearby and distant Faerun. They are not the only bunch of people fighting amongst themselves. The Shadow Masters are fighting amongst themselves. Various individuals vying for higher rank within the organization by eliminating rivals. And Shar, goddess of entropy, remember? Despair?
Yeah.
Seems to be encouraging this. So, the Shadow Masters are also scattered. And one result of their ongoing fighting and hiding from each other is that they're no longer in control of Telflam, or anything much except their individual strongholds and safe houses. And they had safe houses they'd established in Nith, in Fuent, in Sant, in Tamar, and farther afield.
Can you explain real quickly what because the Shadow Masters were a religious thieves guild. Can you explain more what that means?
Bad guys.
You mean like religiously evil?
Yeah, okay. See, the thing is, I don't want to dwell on the Shadow Masters because a Dungeon Master can cast them in various different ways. But the best way of thinking of the Shadow Masters is this is a big bunch of bad guys who control things, so that the government of Telflam was a puppet government. In the old days, the Shadow Masters were really running everything. They were establishing policy.
Okay.
So right now, their iron grip is gone because they're fighting amongst themselves. And what this means is various ambitious merchants of Telflam, both on the Merchants' Council that is ostensibly governing Telflam, and off of it, people who were never members of the Merchants' Council, they've all seized this opportunity of the Shadowmasters losing all grip on power to settle scores and make their own bids for more power. So right now, the council, the Merchants' Council, that's supposed to be governing, is a seething chaos that bickers and accomplishes little and depends increasingly on the outnumbered lawkeepers and civic officials to keep the trains running while they're fighting over everything. Think of certain real-world governments right now and how much shouting and fighting goes on and how little governing goes on. Okay? No, I'm naming no names.
That's okay.
And, because, for people who are listening to this who aren't American, don't worry that you all have your local government that's doing this. Doesn't matter where in the world you are. It's not a unique... Anyway, so a few council members have been assassinated, many have resigned, and others have fought duels with fellow councillors, and some of those duelists have survived, but often gravely wounded, and then they go to seek healing and go into seclusion in their own heavily guarded homes, and they decide that, it's time to go back to concerning myself with my personal mercantile endeavors and get rich again, and leave the power struggle and representing the interests of the city of Telflam to someone else for a little while, because, it's not as much fun anymore. This got serious, and I got to think of my old age, and the wife and children, or the husband and children, or whatever. All of this means that Telflam is a more dangerous place, and it's lost almost all of its influence over Thesk outside its walls. But it doesn't mean it's a fallen city. Instead, business and commerce have picked up. More adventurers are being hired as bodyguards. Individual shippers, shopkeepers, and crafters are making deals and selling wares and seeking new markets and imports with a vigor that hasn't been seen for nigh a century. Telflam is bustling because the individual shopkeepers and merchants aren't living in fear of the Shadowmasters. And they aren't thinking that they're going to get taxed. The foot is going to be on their neck taxing them, being as the Merchants' Council is like arguing about everything, and it's just, the tax collectors are still there, but no new taxes are being imposed because they can't agree on anything. And of course, everybody in town sort of knew that those increased taxes were being dictated behind the scenes by the Shadowmasters, and they're not dictating anything to anybody at the moment. So, Telflam's bustling. The major change a resident or a visitor will notice is that both the Thayan and the Shu influences and presence in the city have waned. Shu merchants made some early and ruthless bids for power and to price fix. As the Shadowmasters lost their grip, they said, we're going to move in. They were trying to exploit their fellow citizens, because when you're price fixing and trying to increase your influence, you're doing it at the expense of the other people in the city. So, guess what? They reaped their reward. The Tell citizens didn't like that, so they gave the Shu violence, arson, looting, and in many cases ran them out of town. So these Shu merchants have largely relocated down the road. In other words, they went along the Golden Way east into Thesk to Sant and Tamar. As for the Thayan Red Wizard Enclave, it's a shadow of its former self after a mysterious strike force of wizards, identities unknown, bolstered by spell-controlled monsters and some mercenaries, attacked and looted the Enclave in 1486 DR, seizing the magic items that were for sale and slaughtering many of the vendors. Now, as the timing of this attack coincided with strife among Red Wizards outside Telflam that demanded attention on the part of most Red Wizards, their usual retaliation in force that they would have done normally if somebody did that to an Enclave never happened. And as some of the monsters were then magically bound to remain in the Enclave and prowl for food, human food, there, and some ambitious Thayans who hate and fear the Red Wizards and saw this as a chance to slay any who came back to Telflam after the harrowing of the Enclave. Thay's presence in Telflam now consists almost entirely of sailors and traders who detest the Red Wizards and slaving and Zastan and all of that. The prosperity of Telflam has been bolstered by several finds of cached treasure in the city and just outside it in Thesk, so the city is a happening place right now. Almost inevitably, there are even a few sly and shadowy individuals in the city who are now claiming to be long-lost Belindres. In other words, implying they are the rightful rulers of Telflam, who should be restored to the castle and the rule and title of Merchant Prince. All in all, interesting times in the city of Black Flame. There you go. There is
Wow.
Telflame. And I can do that for anywhere in the realms. Just give me time to find my notes.
Sure.
But that's what I would do with them. This is unofficial because it's outside the Sword Coast region, so it's not covered in the current official realms. But that's what I'm doing with them.
Well, if it's unofficial in regards to Thay and the Red Wizards, please indulge yourself. Go on.
Oh, okay. So Thay and the Red Wizards. Okay. So, and by the way, the original Realms Agreement, anything I say about the realms is official until it's contradicted by the copyright holder.
All right, that's good.
That was the deal from the beginning, and the agreement's still in place, so far as I know, because it's the same agreement that was the purchase of the realm. So, anyway, so Thay has always been a volcanic country, and up until the Spell Plague, its interior, the plateau of Thay, was lush and fertile. So think real-world Mediterranean climate to a little warmer, and I mean traditionally warmer over the last century, not the heat waves that have been killing people in Europe this last decade with global climate change. Okay, the sort of real-world Mediterranean climate that we think of, with the coastal cities climatically akin to Mediterranean due to the moderating effect of the Sea of Fallen Stars. And that is the way Thay is depicted in the earliest Realms lore, the second edition Realms lore. In the tumult of the Spell Plague, the plateau soared in height. It was pushed up amid much volcanic tumult. The glaciers melted, several active volcanoes split Thay Mount, and ash falls, and the heat and the water boiling off all happened, and that left parched badlands and deserts. Ash and smoke still darken the skies over Thay, making the climate cold. Summertime frosts, formerly hot winds in the Thayan mountains, are now icy. And these climatic effects of large volcanic eruptions happen in our real world too. Just Google Krakatoa and Tambora and you'll see, what they do. So Thay's crop exports have shrunk to nigh nothing. Now, Zastam's undead don't need to eat. and Thay's outposts, not just trading enclaves, but all the private holdings all over the heartlands owned by individual Thayans, from red wizards to far-traveled Thayan traders, provide food for Thay's coastal ports. They ship it back there. And the coastal ports are still habitable. They're just not as warm as they once were. And the volcanic tumult is lessening. So Thay may be heading back towards where it was in the 1300s DR, the second edition Realms lore coverage of it, though the plateau will always be cooler than it once was, unless it sinks back towards sea level, and restoring the fertility of the land may take centuries if it happens at all. Now, the Red Wizards, working together under firm and disciplined leadership, could spell shift a lot of the ash, get rivers flowing again, and so on. But Zastam seems uninterested in such an effort, which would cause fresh climactic tumult as it was happening too. So that's geophysical Thay. As far as political Thay, that's up to individual dungeon masters, particularly in regards to the current state, reach, aims, and power of Zastam. For the root secret of Thay, Lord of the Realms George Krashos has penned some essential Realms lore.
Yes.
Entitled Tyrants in Scarlet, The Founding History of the Zulkirs of Thay, and it can be found for free on the Dungeon Masters Guild, on DM's Guild website.
And if they come to, if any of the fans come to the Candlekeep meeting that we have at Gen Con, I'll have more copies of that.
Excellent.
That's
Yes.
good to know. That's great.
Yeah, that's it. It's sort of, for one thing, it explains why Thay's been a magical powerhouse. There's a root secret of the realms there that is key to understanding how to DM Thay. Wahaha! And that's all I'll say. And by the way, while we're at it, when it comes to Impultur, I noticed on the website somebody was saying, hey, they wanted coverage of Impultur. George has written enough lore on Impultur to make it currently one of the best covered realms in the entire Forgotten Realms. And you can find all his Impultur stuff at the DM's Guild too.
And George is committed, let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So,
here's another area that I think you have free reign to talk about is that I'm pronouncing it the way I look at it. It's Murghom.
yes, Murghom. Okay, Murghom was once part of Mulhora. The realm of Murghom became independent, and its rivals are now Mulhorand and Semphar. Throughout the 1300s DR, it was a breadbasket country of farmers that exported bulk food to its rivals and other lands around the Sea of Fallen Stars. So, by the way, world builders out there, when you are building your fantasy worlds, make sure you have some place that is producing food amongst all the people who are killing each other and having marching armies to war, because armies need to eat. Those of you who are cast your minds back when we were building the known world of D&D, which became Mystara, and Bruce Hurd handed me the 5 Shires and said, "Hey, do us a product from the 5 Shires. You know where all the happy little halflings live?" And I said, "Okay, it's going to be the farming breadbasket place, because there isn't one so far. And all of these people are going to want to write cool regions full of, witches and weird magic and big earth-shaking things. I need somebody to produce the crops so we can all eat and live till next year." So Murgam is one of the breadbaskets. So, but it was best known as a country of horse breeders, horse trainers, and superb horsemen. Its armies were swiftly moving mounted archers and horse lancers. They would race in, strike, and move on. It exported draft horses and riding mounts, but it never exported as many as merchants would have liked, and very few militarily trained steeds, because the Mugomi quite rightly feared that any foe or invader would end up using their own horses against them, robbing them of their speed and cavalry charge fast strike superiority. Like, as long as you're the only guys in town who have fast-moving tanks, you can rule the battlefield. The moment everybody has them,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
they didn't want to lose that unique. Okay, so let's fast forward from what Murgam was to now in the realms, the late 1400s DR. The Morgomi are still horse breeders and farmers. They still speak Mulhorandi, and they revere the deities of the Mulhorandi pantheon before all other deities. They are Mulan, but they now consider themselves not to be. Like, they're changing their sort of their narratives in the same way that Americans will say, "We're not British." Well, when in the 13 colonies, you pretty much all were at the beginning, but you renounced that, and then you say, "No, we're different now." Okay, they're doing the same thing. We're different now. What's changed in Murgam is dragons. The coming of the dragons in 1409 DR swiftly led to Murgam becoming ruled by dragon princes, who devour enough of the locally bred horses so that there are none left to export. These dragons took over the realm entirely by 1412 DR and have been careful to publicly support each other and stand together against landless dragons, letting humans see no weakness among worms and no chance of successful rebellion. The human viziers and chamberlains who serve each dragon prince have been encouraged to limit the number of armed bodyguards, but to increase spy networks, so the human populace has little chance for independent fairings. Intruding outland adventurers are closely watched and often relieved of gems, gold, and magic that a dragon prince might cherish. All adventuring bands are forbidden to settle in Murgam, and they will be exterminated if they offer violence to any dragon prince, but not if they offer violence to human minions or landless dragons. Skalnadr is the first prince among the dragon princes, but he's not king, and he never will be. The dragon princes have no taste for a lone ruler over them, and they prefer their secret councils, held atop the earth moat, yes, it's still there, of Dracowir. The dragon princes of Murgam concern themselves with guarding their rule over the land and weakening potential invaders, and they also concern themselves with their ongoing game of Zorvintal, and increasingly with subtly meddling in the politics of places in the realms more and more distant from Murgam. They do this by means of hired adventurers, who are always stalked and closely watched over by the Dragon Prince's human spies. The Dragon Princes are especially wary of elves, of powerful human wizards, and of all human cabals, factions, and power groups that might work against them, including the Cult of the Dragon, which they are determined to end up controlling the leadership of. If they fail to do so, and they haven't yet, it's the opinion of almost all Dragon Princes that the cult is better eliminated.
So the cult of the dragon is still an ongoing force.
Oh yes, it's just like everybody else, it's been scattered and riven by strife. And in other words, your dungeon master can have tiny little local cells and rival leaders vying for, increase the adventuring opportunities. Yeah. Anyway, the Dragon Princes are also hostile to the Zhentarim because, many Zents traditionally used dragons as subjugated steeds. In the past, we saw Manchun doing this in Spellfire. Such behavior can't be tolerated because it gives other humans ideas. The names, specific aims, schemes, and deeds of individual dragon princes are left up to individual dungeon masters. Like the human self-styled nobility of the border kingdoms, the natures and real daily power and reach of dragon princes vary widely, in part because of the power of individual dragons varying, and in part because what they're interested in. Some of them really don't give a hoot. Some of them revel in dominating and manipulating humans. And most of them are sort of somewhere in between. So Murgam can be a very uncomfortable place to adventure, but home to a great collection of prime movers or big villains for a D&D campaign set in the realms. There you go!
Yay!
Good stuff.
That is real good stuff. Oh my god. You're making my head spin, Ed.
This is what I do. I carpet the realms in, but over here, and think of the children. But think of the children growing wings and warts and having magic beams shoot out of their eyes, and that's happening over here. And as a result, all these people over here want to kidnap those children because, hey, magic beams shooting out of eyes. And so I'm always like, what can we do to stir the pot without ruining what we're cooking? Anyway.
That's great. I love that.
I got another one here from Spike Murphy. And I'm going to completely butcher this name. How old is Slarkrethel the Kraken?
Only his mother knows.
Only his mother knows. It says there's conflicting accounts. And what are his goals for Faerun and the multiverse?
Now you were getting into NDA stuff.
Oh, damn it!
You're also getting into stuff that's probably better left to individual dungeon masters to decide. Remember we were talking earlier about who you want to have in the forefront in your campaign because of the style you want to have in your campaign? That should be left to individual dungeon masters to decide. I can tell you that it's NDA'd, and I can tell you it's NDA'd for a reason. There are plans or were plans. I don't know if they're still going forward. And so as a result, I am NDA'd on that. I can probably see what I can find out by talking. I know a guy who could talk to a guy. And 4 or 5 months from now, someone in the dark alley might whisper a word or two in my shell-like ear, which I might be able to pass on to the fans' page. But no promises on that one, because some NDAs, you just can't find any way to lift them. And some NDAs, you say, hey, can we talk about this now? And the answer is nope, but it's been hanging fire for 20... Nope.
Okay, well, we'll skip the Kraken for now.
Never skip the Kraken. Just open another bottle.
There you go. Actually, the Kraken is a really good rum.
Yes.
That's right. What happened to the Illithid Empire after the Gift threw off their shackles of bondage?
Well, the Illithid Empire began to do their own decadent things because what they did was they had lost their slaves, their servants who did everything for them, and that completely shattered their empire and their way of doing things. They were doing we lie here like emperors, and they place what we want in our hands. Brains. Nicely stewed brains, also brains. And sometimes a soupçon of some nice green fermented worm wine and brains. And then it was like, okay, now we have to fend for ourselves. So immediately they all blamed each other because we all need scapegoats.
Right.
Again, you can just look at various real-world leaders. It wasn't me. It was somebody else. I'm going to blame somebody else. I'm going to blame that guy. And so there was a lot of that going on, and the Illithids started fighting amongst themselves, which also guaranteed their empire went away. And it's still gone away as an empire. What it is a whole bunch of cabals of lithids who all have their own ideas about how they will get back to their rightful greatness and superiority.
Oh, so that would be a great adventure hook that you run across a cabal of illithids in a deep forest somewhere who are looking to take over the region and start rebuilding their empire.
Sure, but one of the things they've learned is you can't rely on any one group of slaves. That was the lesson they learned. But they still have no interest in whatsoever, most of them, in personal danger, putting themselves out there. They want to work through intermediaries whenever possible. So they love duping humans and using other humans to do the duping, so that they are an unseen Mr. Big and Kingpin in the background. For one thing, a lot of humans would be reluctant to work for somebody who's mauve and glistening with mucus and has tentacles that slide in your ears and up your nose and dig your brains out. There's something about them that they just wouldn't be enthused about having a boss like that. So they tend to stay in the background and work through aliases and deceive people as to who they're really working for, because the whole point of being superior to these cattle is that you can get the cattle to do things for you rather than having to do that yourself. Otherwise, you're down at the level of the cattle, churning in the muck like the cattle. No, get the cattle to do it for us. And that's what they're doing. And as a result, yeah, you could run into lithids everywhere where there's cover, like a deep forest, but they will be working through others, and they will not be wanting to confront you. They will be wanting to recede so you can never come to grips with them. And you run into all the monsters they've got ready, or they know where the monsters are, so they'll lure you into the monster's path. Because, they can then scoop up your brains and have dessert after you've been killed by the monster.
Right. Yeah, but I thought the illithids wanted you alive.
Oh, yeah, but some people take a fair amount of time dying. As in, if the monster's eating you from the feet upwards, the illithid can still scoop your brain out when you're quivering in horror and pain and terror, because then all the adrenaline rush of your emotions are making your brain feel super alive as you desperately watch your entire life flash before your eyes. And the illithid goes, "Oh, I'll have that. Reruns."
That's good.
Oh my god. Oh, and here's another one. These are all Spike Murphy. He's got a lot of questions. Huh?
That's okay.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. It really is. It means he's really intrigued and is dedicated to being a fan of the realms. What's the origin of the Dragonborn on Toril?
NDA.
Are you serious?
Oh, wow.
Yep. That's NDA because of the way in which Dragonborn were introduced into the realms, and the initial thing, that's a Kryn thing. Keep them separate. Because for back in the day when they were, quote, TSR worlds, they had to be kept separate, which is why the heraldry of the realms was de-emphasized, because heraldry was Greyhawk.
Right.
And I couldn't have people who rode dragons in the realms as aerial steeds and had lances, because that's Dragon Lance. And I couldn't have magical lances, even though I had them in the realms, because that's Dragonlance. So they wanted to keep the world separate, and Dragonborn was a Kryn thing, not a realms thing. And then when they introduced them, they ended up with 3 different explanations for how they got into the realms, including, we're not going to explain it all, they're just in it in this new edition. Suck it up. They've always been here. Yeah.
I mean, like in the novels, wasn't one of the first time I read about it, wasn't that in the book Alias?
No, that's Dragon Bait.
Dragon, yeah, but his name was Dragon Bait. Wasn't he a Dragonborn?
No, he was a Sorial.
No.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah, that's a different thing. Yes, you have to keep your scaly lizards separate. Otherwise, the thing you think you're having for dinner will have you for dinner.
The last one I know about are the Gorn in Star Trek. So
yes, and you have to be careful, because if you get your scaly lizard folk type critters wrong, you may be thinking that you're going to kill and eat this thing and roast it for dinner, and it may be thinking, I have to mate with this human first. And that could make for some uncomfortable moments.
Or uncomfortable dinner talk.
Yes. Yes, well, yeah. Ooh. Eat me, rah, rah, rah. Ah, dear. Because there were conflicting ideas in-house amongst the design team about how the Dragonlance got in the realms, they slapped an NDA on it for all of us because they didn't want us all mouthing off in public with different contradictory origin stories. While they worked something out and there was going to be an adventure attached, the NDA is still there. Even though, now you could say that maybe the rise of the Dragon Queen, rise of Tiamat and the Horde of the Dragon Queen was what that story became. But I'm not sure that it is, because that story was different. I don't want to ruin that story for anybody, but obviously Tiamat and dragons are involved, and I can say that there are dragon masks involved. So it got far afield from the original origin of the Dragonborn. So I don't know if that counts as being, that's the Dragonborn story, so you can now talk about it because the NDA is over, and it's not. So I can't tell you it's NDA. So I will go away and find out what I can say about that, if anything. And if the answer is you can say something, I will come back and do it on the fan page. But there may be nothing, because I may get told, no, NDA is still in place. No removal of NDAs for you.
That's right, and no soup for you.
Yeah.
Curry, I'm like hoarding the whole thing here. Do you have any questions for Ed?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming to the Spike Question Hour. This has been great.
Yeah, let's put a spike in that, and let's know. Actually,
the funny part is I probably have another half a dozen questions.
Of course you do.
Well, no, I have nothing against. These are great questions from Spike, although some of them are, outside the realms in the larger D&D multiverse, and my expertise falls off sharply, as in they should be answered by other people than me. But yeah, being as there were tons of other questions on posed on the fan page, maybe somebody else's question should get a chance, because there are all these other people going, what am I, chopped liver? Well, not yet, but when the illicit gets in the room.
Well, here's one from Dino Miller, or Dino Miller. They just want to know more about the Ice Spires and the Verbeeg Runecasters.
Okay. Well, I will have to go away and find my notes.
Oh.
Ice Spires, Verbeeg Spellcasters. Why do you want to know about the Verbeeg Spellcasters? What did they ever do to you?
Now, there's a question for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's like saying, I want to know about the Gondolieri in Venice. Well, yeah, they're Gondolieri in Venice. There's one woman, and right now, and they've all been men up until now, and they stick these poles and push the gondolas down the canals. What else do you need to know? So I'm what do they want to know about Verbeeg Spellcasters?
No. That's just one of their questions.
Their cuisine, their fashion sense,
I guess so.
Okay, well,
love making rituals. I don't know.
Well, if you can ask Mr. Miller to, I'm going to assume it's male. Could with that first name, might not be. To give us a follow-up supplementary. What do you want to know about Verbeeg Spellcasters?
Oh, there you go. Well, maybe he'll listen to this and then post it on the page. And here's one from Christian Zoltar Bellomo.
Okay.
He wants to know how Larlock is.
Larlock is just fine. And he's just fine under an NDA. The last we saw of Larlock, he and the Srinshi were going somewhere together in the Herald. And that could be a wonderful Gothic love story. Or it could be a torrid moment of passion. Or it could be the spell battle to end all spell battles, or they could be sitting down to knit something together. We'll never know until the NDA is lifted. So, what I can tell you is, Larlock has not been seen directly in the realms from that moment. But Larlock, as you might remember, was another of these Illithid type guys who worked through intermediaries. He had a whole bunch of liches and so on, spellcasters, servitor spellcasters, who were working for him. They are still working on their various research projects. Just like tenured faculty have to go on at a university working on their promised things, even when their boss isn't there.
Right.
So, Larlock himself has not been seen since that moment, which should alone tell you something. Like, don't mess with the syringe sheet.
Don't mess with the syringe sheet. Yeah, matter of fact, that's true. That was one of the other questions. I have to find that one later. But how about Joe Kelly wants to know about the ruins of Cessrendale?
Yes, what about the ruins of Cessrendale?
Just,
Cessrendale was sown with salt years ago so that the crops would not grow there. It's never been continuously inhabited since. It is a wasteland. Think of all scrub abandoned farmland across North America where the nature reclaims it in a wild covered with weeds and it's still lots of rocks and trees and trees and rocks and rocks and trees and trees and rocks.
Okay.
Yeah. So and it is also an area close to mountains, and it's also an area that has been roamed by monsters. As in, it's one of the few places where wildlife can that is mobile can avoid hunters by just moving constantly, and and a place that they're not going to get exterminated by a bunch of Dales folk who live there and are trying to farm, would rather not have the wolf at their door, so they kill the wolf. That doesn't apply in Cessrendale. So you have a fallen dale. Over that period of time, all of the buildings, which were all wood, have completely vanished. You know, like if you walk around Cessrendale, you will search in vain for streets and buildings. It's just wilderland. And it is also, therefore, the haunt of brigands and outlaws. And wandering, foraging, orc, goblin, and hobgoblin raiding bands, of course.
But why did they salt the earth?
Cessrendale was the loser in a war, and the winning side wanted to wipe out Cessrendale completely, so they wouldn't have their enemy rearing its head and creating problems again. They just decided to do away with them once and for all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was back before we first saw the realms. This is back before the 1300s, so this is like ancient history in the Dales. But it's one of those cautionary tales, you know.
Okay. What about the Thunder Peaks?
What about the Thunder Peaks?
Remember this?
Yeah.
Remember this? What about that one guy?
That one guy. Oh, it's just the question just says the foothills of the Thunder Peaks and the Tower of Tranquil.
Ah, the tower. Yeah, well. This is something else that I would probably have to check my notes to see what I can talk about. The Thunder Peaks being always a wild area, always home to monsters and outcasts. I will look up and see what can I tell you about that. And the Tower of Tranquil. Well. There are all these things. Tower Tranquil was covered under an NDA for the longest time. I'm not sure if it still is. I will have to check.
Okay.
I have signed more NDAs than you've had hot dinners. Or than I've had hot dinners. Holy moly. They love to NDA me. Here's an NDA. Here, have another.
Well, let's see if you can find one you know more about here. This is from Kim Franson. Wants to know more about Saucel.
Saucel has been... Okay, Saucel and the Saucergrim. Saucel was this isolated, far northern area in which there was very little in published Realms lore. So I was asked about that before, and I actually imparted what I knew of Saucel on Candlekeep, because Chainmail Girl, amongst others, wanted to know more about Saucel. So when Callie asks, I deliver.
Of course.
So there was long ago lore coverage by me of imparting what little about Saucel I could share at the time, because there were still NDAs, because that was an area that they were going to use for an adventure with an outside computer game or license or whatever, and I don't think it ever happened, but that doesn't mean the NDA has been lifted, so I don't know if there's anything else I can add beyond that. We'll see, because
there's not much on the Forgotten Realms wiki.
No.
It just says it's pronounced this way, it's located here.
Yeah, there should be more. There should be more than that, but not necessarily retrieved and put out for public consumption. But I believe that if you do a search, I realize the search function for Candlekeep could be improved upon. You get way too many hits for everything, and you have to sort through them. But yeah, I did talk about Saucel there. So
Yeah, it says that it's a chilling place locked between Pulveria and Yal Tingri.
Yes. Yes. It is one of the cold, frigid lands of the howling NDA.
And I think this is probably a good place right now to call this a night.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. My goodness. Look at the time.
Oh, 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Has it been that long? Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
it has. So I want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, no problem. It's fun. I love talking about the realms. I mean, there is a limit to how much time and there's probably a limit to the size of things you can upload to YouTube. When you were having problems uploading the first one, I'm thinking, might want to cut it in half.
I may have to cut this one in 3.
Yeah, just to make it
sure.
just to make it upload better.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But yeah, this is good fun for me. So thank you. There are the usual frustrations. We always end up to, in something that is NDA. It's inevitable. There's so many things I can't talk about, for various reasons. But yeah, it's always fun. I love talking about the realms.
We love asking about the realms. I know that Curry does. Curry actually introduced me to the realms when I was working as a transplant coordinator here in Florida, and we spent a lot of late nights together talking about D&D and
moving spleens from body to body.
mostly it was eyes.
Eyes. Yeah. Keep an eye on the bar, Mr. Pugh.
That's right. And he actually introduced me to the realms and got me hooked on it back. This is 1990, I guess, 1989.
Yeah, 1990 roughly. Yeah.
Yeah, roughly 1990. It's completely. I mean, it's.
Your mom bought you the box set. You were saying.
Right, she bought me the box set, and I remember her looking at me going, "I don't know. They say it's devil worship." And then like a year later, she goes, "I never should have bought you that thing for Christmas because all I did was read and write and play Dungeons and Dragons at that point." And it's just steadily grown more and more into my life, and my wife understands that this is part of my life now. And for me to be able to sit here and ask you questions for 3 hours is just a pinnacle of that coming up to this point and being able to experience it. It's just I just can't thank you enough.
Oh, hey, I'm just a guy who
I know that
came up with a world and wouldn't go away.
The man who wouldn't die.
Yes. No, but yeah, thank you. To me, the humbling thing about the realms is how much it has come to mean to so many people all around the world. And so I've traveled the world making friends in all sorts of places and being asked to, marry people. I mean, not meaning to perform the marriages of people. I should say.
Female girl was one of them.
Yes.
No.
Well, yeah. Because Callie had no male living relatives, she needed someone to give her away, and so she asked me. Great. So yeah, I scrounged around and said, I think I could still get into this suit. I'll just have to take my father's body out of it, and
you should have called me. I was a research coordinator, remember?
Oh yeah, okay. No, but I mean, to me, the delightful thing is how much the realms has come to mean to so many people that they care enough to ask weird questions about this imaginary place that we all play in, and
it seems so obscure, and you're like, what? Of course. And to them, it's a major part of their life. Well, you remember the video I sent you from last year. Mm-hmm. Some of the people were in tears just thanking you for their childhood.
Yeah, because it means so much, and they all focus on different details. I've had people. I have once had a guy get on a plane in Greece, fly to Toronto, take a cab to the public library I was working at to ask me about the geology of a particular part of the realms.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
What were the rocks like? Because he was a geologist. And if I could answer it, he could understand that area of the realms. He could get it. So I told him what I knew. Thank goodness I knew some basic geology. And he went away happy as a clam. And I thought, whew,
Oh, I can imagine.
wow, he's gone. He'll never know. I made it all up. No.
Until now, when he listens to this.
Yes, well, there is that. Sorry, it's a secret just between you, me, and the entire world. Okay.
Ed, just thanks for the time. I'm looking forward to doing more of these if you have any more time. This is, for me, just scratching the surface of the things that we can keep alive and out there for people. If you have a moment to just kind of review with us what your social media handles are so the listeners can get in on ways to interact with you and interface with you besides the podcasts, that would be great.
Well, the best ways to get a hold of me are through the Fans of Ed Greenwood page. Post something.
Okay.
Or on Twitter, I'm at Edverse, the Edverse. And I check Twitter twice a day. I try and check it in the mornings and tweet some fun nonsense. And I try and do the same thing in the evening. But of course, what morning and what evening are depends on my crazy schedule. So
Sure.
noon might be morning for me one day because I've just woken up,
Right.
and 4 a.m. might be evening for me that same
Right.
day or whatever. But I mean, Twitter and the Fans of Greenwood page. I also occasionally answer stuff in the Forgotten Realms archives and so on, but
Sure.
I tend to chime in answers there when somebody says, well, maybe we should ask Ed because nobody else knows. I tend to do that as opposed to jumping in when somebody is talking about their enjoyment of the realms instead of saying, hi, you don't know me, but my name's Ed Greenwood. And I can... that sounds a bit like rude, to me. It's like, no, let people be themselves. But if they ask, and there again, I'm in the same thing. If they're asking for something and I know something I'm not allowed to talk about or NDA, I like to just stay quiet.
Sure.
Because the world would be at a better place if all those people who've learned how to communicate, if some of them would learn how to shut up.
Oh, so true.
Your time is limited, but we would like to do this again.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Now, if it's stuff like the places in the realms, give me a heads up beforehand, and I can go and find some of my notes and say something more worthwhile than just, I don't know, I'll go in and look it up.
Well, yeah. I think that makes you more human too. That's because we always think of Ed Greenwood as the Faerun computer. You push a button, turn a knob, and then he spits out what your answer is.
Push a button, turn a knob, and he makes it up with a big smile on his face.
Yeah.
To make you think that he knew it all along.
That's the man behind the curtain,
Yeah, it's the art of being a politician. Oh, everything's under control. I have a plan. and in 20 seconds, when I come back out of that bathroom, I'll tell you what it is, because I'm going to be sitting on there on the pot for 20 seconds, not doing anything bathroom-wise, frantically making up the plan. So there's a lot of that.
But you do it so well that nobody would know.
Yes, pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Just don't look at the curtain, because then you'll see where I swiped the curtain from.
Well, nobody wants to know how the sausage is made.
Yes! Oh, yes!
No,
yes,
not at all.
Let's not go there. No, let's not go there.
Don't go there.
Well, no, we'll save the story about the jalapeno poppers some other time.
Oh, yes.
Ed remembers that story all of a sudden.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it was under painful insertions and how they come back to haunt you.
Oh, wow. All right.
Oh, my God. Well, Ed,
preview for next time, ladies and gentlemen.
Episode 3 of Mages and Sages.
How to behave badly in Faerun or on the air in a podcast. No. Okay, thank you. This was great.
All right, bye.
Bye.